Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for this special council meeting, Thursday, July 18th, 2024, joint session with the NCIP committee. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And before we do roll call and announcements, and I'm going to repeat this, but I just want to really emphasize this tonight. We have an owl that we're using for folks that are participating virtually. And it's very sensitive. So any little noise, it will pick up and it will change, it will move the camera to focus on you. So I just ask, no cross talk, please try to stay quiet if you're not speaking. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it to Clementine for roll call and to share how public can participate in public comment.
First for the city council, Councilmember Barber. Present. Councilmember Garcia.
Here.
Councilmember Hata.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Present.
And Mayor Williamson.
Here.
And for the NCIP committee, for Emilio Oich, AJ Jordy. For Alternate, Amy Joker. No, Kelly Smith. Here. For Deer Flats, David Cohen.
Here.
For Scott. For Delmonte Beach, Jamie Fields. Here. For Delmonte Grove with Grande, Scott Hansen.
Here.
For downtown, Kurt Tipton.
Here.
For Fisherman Flats, Gary Baker.
Here.
For Glenwood, Lee Whitney. Here. For Monterey Vista, Pontianish is not with us this evening. For New Monterey, Liari Obana. Here. For Oak Grove, Luke Adam. Here. For Old Town, Susan Ricketson. Here. For Skyline, Dennis Duke.
Here.
And for Villa Del Monte, Phil Donovan.
No, Tammy Jennings, alternate.
Excellent. So let the record reflect that the Monterey Vista naval support activity in the city of neighborhoods are on record. And information on participating in this meeting and providing public comment, including remotely by Zoom or telephone, is available on the agenda, which is online at ichurchmonterey.org. We also have copies in the back on this table. Remote commenters, you will be muted until it is your turn to speak, and a timer will be shown on the screen. If you're connected on Zoom, the timer is accurate with no delay. In-person attendees must keep phones and devices muted to prevent audio interference with the meeting. In addition, the technology we're using for today's meeting is very sensitive and picks up small sounds, including wood birds. Please speak clearly and minimize crosstalk. Thank you for participating in your city government.
Awesome. And with that, thank you, Clementine. We'll go ahead and kick off the one item that we have on the agenda today, which is presentation. Overview of the Neighborhood and Community Improvement Program, current status of the NCIP program, condition of city infrastructure, and the city council relationship. Before I pass this off to Hans, I just want to thank everybody today for taking the time to be here. I think, at least since I've been on the council, this is a first for the council to meet with the NCIP. I think this is long overdue. And I'm really excited to see what's going to come from this. Because at the end of the day, we all are residents of the city of Monterey. And we all care about our community. So I really appreciate you all being here, and I look forward to a really healthy discussion. With that, I'm going to pass to staff for the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everyone. We can follow the presentation. So thank you. We are meeting here today at Hilltop Park Center, which is on the outskirts of New Monterey. We're bordering Pacific Grove across the street. That's why the street is called Isidero, because it splits Monterey and PG. Hilltop Park Center is our largest community center that we have in the city of Monterey. It's a repurposed school building. It's about 18,000 square feet large. We provide programming in this building for all ages, starting with toddlers to teenagers to adults, and also those folks that are call themselves seniors. We have a lot of programs here that attract thousands of people throughout the year. I'll give you some examples. Monday through Wednesdays, year-round, we have from 3 to 6, and also from 6 to 9 ceramics classes. We have downstairs here another set of equal number of classrooms, and the pottery classes are highly sought after with a full wait list. In the evening class, we have 48 participants. This is also a site where we hold preschool for young children. My son was here Tuesday to Friday, 9 to 1 p.m. And again, 20 kids are here in the preschool in the morning. We have a wait list here for this program as well. On Mondays, we hold morning stories with toddlers. Currently, we have starting in June, July, tiny tot summer camps. I think this is the other room where we hold piano lessons. We also hold guitar lessons here. There's a field sport component that we host outside with respect to different sports camps like sports basketball camp. Another room is equipped with large mirrors. It's the same size of this room where we have ballet classes for toddlers, ballet classes for kids. Pilates classes are here, theater for kids. It's a place also where the community assembles from time to time for community meetings. We are hosting community events here, Red Cross, blood drives, et cetera. In the back is Rachel Days. Guys, she is our community center director, and we are very, very glad and happy that she is here. And this Hilltop Park Center, we will share a little bit more about it in our staff presentation. Following is my overview over the agenda as we are envisioning it. We'll give an overview over the NCIP. I think it's always important to remember where we started, where we are, in order to define also where we are in the present time. We'll talk about the current NCIP program, and we will brief all of you about the condition of our infrastructure. And I try to, at the end of that, sum it all up, and then we hand it all over with that longer introduction to the City Council and to you, the NCIP members, and ask for what you're thinking and facilitate maybe also the conversation around the table. So that's our agenda for tonight. We have several folks that will brief you or share with you what we think is important to present tonight. It starts with our Assistant City Manager, Ned Roshana Satira. Then we have our NCIP Coordinator, Reggie Paulding, as well as our Public Works Director, Andrea Rennie here, who will also share with you some of the briefing slides. And with that, I think it's important to understand a little bit of the history of NCIP because the dates a little bit further back than some of us are old in the room, and we want to look at what was the driving, what were the driving factors when the NCIP program was actually created, and what kind of elements were at that time important to the community, and then of course a program like the NCIP develops over time. When you look back and connect the dots into the history, it might show you also where we should go in the future. So with that, I hand it over to Ned Roshana Satira.
Thank you very much, Hans, and good evening, Mayor, City Council, as well as members of the NCIP committee. Glad to be before you today. As Hans mentioned, I plan to go through a brief history of the NCIP, maybe more even a deep dive. That way we can have a better understanding on not only the NCIP, but also how the city's budget is framed in relation to the city's investment in public infrastructure. So we'll walk through the history based on going through past budget books all the way back to the 1970s, actually, which brought us to where we are today. So as we go back all the way to 1976, so this is when the Citizens Tax Committee was formed. And at this time, the Citizens Tax Committee recognized that there was a lack of funding for key city infrastructure that was beginning to be deteriorated. And part of that was a recommendation from the Citizens Tax Committee to have a minimum of 10% of general fund revenue go towards capital improvement, CIP, or capital improvement program, which helps fund a variety of infrastructure needs in the city, ranging from roads to sewers and streets and public buildings and facilities, fire stations and the like. Prior to 1978, it's very interesting to look at this data. All of the TOT revenue that came in, so 100% of hotel tax was actually designated to actually fund quote unquote visitor-related capital facilities. And this was because other city revenue could cover operational expenses and neighborhood needs. So at that time, in the 1970s, and this was the case for most cities in the state of California, the number one source of revenue for cities was property tax. The second was sales tax, and other sources of revenue like hotel tax always came in third. And after that, after Prop 13, that changed everything. Many of you were around during Prop 13 or familiar about how in 1978, Prop 13 and the Howard Jarvis Tax Association lobbied and successfully brought and California voters approved rollbacks of property tax base and limiting the property tax rate, as well as future increases of property tax revenue that impacted cities throughout the state of California. There were expenditure and hiring freezes. In 1978, there was, it stated in the city manager's budget message, quote, "We have deferred much needed capital facilities to the future." That included the parking facilities, included the harbor. And at that time, it was determined that no longer could TOT revenue 100% go towards visitor serving facilities. They also needed to go towards other operations of the city and other capital investments. That was the same year the TOT increased from 6% to 8%. In 1978 to 1979, the Citizens Tax Committee again recommended, because they weren't able to meet this goal, at least 10% of general fund revenue to be allocated for capital outlay and capital improvement program. And I quote from the budget, "To do less than this would be to not deal realistically and adequately with the future needs of our community. In effect, it would say that we are going to sacrifice the long-term capital needs of the community to our short-term operational needs. While this approach can be made to work for a year or even a number of years, it will not work for the long term without producing extremely harmful consequences in terms of bequeathing crisis situations to our successors." Very, very interesting. So let's go to the following fiscal year. This is when City Council recognized concerns about building and wharf maintenance, as well as deferred maintenance needs throughout the city of Monterey. And I quote, "The temptation in municipal government, particularly during periods of restricted revenues, is to put available money into current operational concerns and to neglect the task of maintaining the physical inventory of the community. We now know that we could be facing a serious crisis in the future because of past postponement of rehabilitation efforts, unless we more vigorously address the issues of building and wharf maintenance." Again, in both of these areas, addressing these concerns at past levels of expenditures and staffing will result in a work backlog, a continuing decline, which will push needed repairs to future years when we may even have less capacity for dealing with that. This was back in 1980-81.
Yeah, sorry, real quick,
Yeah.
where are you pulling these from? Where's this information?
Yeah, this information is coming from the budget and the budget message, which, so when a budget is presented to the city council, there's the budget message, and there's of course the numbers that make up the revenues, expenditures, and the projections, of course. So these are all quotes directly from the hard copies of the budgets that were adopted by city council. Thank you, again. Great question. May 14th, 1985, this is when voters approved Measure B, and it was approved by 2/3 of voters in Monterey. Shall the city of Monterey's TOT be increased from 8% to 10%, and the increase, which is 2%, be used for such purposes as neighborhood and park improvements, the preservation of open space and the waterfront, and other municipal facility improvements. And this was done because there was a need to invest in not only the operations, which historically has been part of the city's tradition, but also the need to focus on neighborhood and park improvements and those other facilities, and which brings us to where we are. The advisory vote to extend a moratorium on new visitor accommodation facilities was also adopted as part of that same measure. The 1985 to 86 budget. This is actually when TOT for the first time surpasses sales tax as the #1 source of revenue for city funding. And it's very unique because most cities in California, as many of you know, don't have as many hotels and visitor serving accommodations as we do. So we rely very heavily on TOT to provide the services that we all rely on. At that time, there was a TOT allocation formula. And this was actually for many years, there were TOT allocation formulas. What that meant was council actually said, what percentage of how much of TOT is gonna go towards specific uses, right? So back in 85, 86, the allocation formula was 20% of TOT revenue would be dedicated to waterfront restoration. 10% of hotel tax would go to road improvements. 7.5% of hotel tax would go to neighborhood improvements. 5% for civic center improvements, 2% for historic preservation, 0.5% for the performing arts center proposal, and then a significant allocation of hotel tax revenue would go towards the new, very new conference center operations as well as bond payments. So that's how the allocation formula was set earlier. The 1985-86 budget message read, quote, "There is no universally acceptable nor magical answer to appropriate allocation formula for the TOT, which would satisfy the various diverse elements within the community, many of whom would like to see this money used in quite different ways because of competing priorities, as you all know. The city manager was, quote, guided by a desire to find a new formula which is in the overall community interest and one that attempts to strike the best balance between competing needs, with the realization that no one interest or need will be totally satisfied." That probably resonates with all of you as we talk about budget priorities, right?
Who's the city manager at the time?
85, 86, I believe was either Lee Reardon or John Dunn. I think it might have been John.
Yeah, John.
John Dunn. And John Dunn, as city manager, he later went to Seaside and also served as city manager in San Luis Obispo.
And Lee came in after.
Yeah, Lee came in after that. In 1985-86 budget, that was the first year that we saw the neighborhood improvement fund, and this is the precursor to the NCIP. And council was in agreement with the purpose of the neighborhood improvement fund. Quote, "To devote increased attention to maintaining the quality of life in our neighborhoods through the building and maintaining of appropriate public facilities, parks, streets, walkways, recreational facilities, and other improvements." There were policy questions that were posed but not yet finalized at that time. The first was, what is the funding allocation to this neighborhood improvement fund for building and maintenance? And the second was how to develop and review proposed neighborhood improvements in a fair and equitable manner. The NCIP came shortly after that. City manager, John Dunn, great question. 1985-86 budget stated that, and this is the challenging fact, right? Any allocation of TOT monies for any specified purpose represents a reduction of that amount, which flows to the general fund of the city, and as such, will ultimately represent a decrease in one or more of the city's operating budget, capital improvement program, the general fund portion of it, or general fund reserves for future emergencies. What John Dunn was saying at that time, and that holds true today for any type of allocation of TOT, is that any allocation of TOT means funds that aren't as flexible or can be used for other services like police or fire or other maintenance of other capital facilities. In 1986 and 87, there was a very strong feeling among residents that residential neighborhoods have not received their fair share of public improvements. Many of the public improvements up to that time went towards widening of Del Monte Avenue or other types of projects. And so streets, sidewalk improvements, and park facilities were examples of that. Neighborhood representatives pointed out the need to quote unquote catch up with street and park facilities in other areas of the community. Meanwhile, that same year, major projects, there was a major and significant capital improvement boom, if you would like to call it that, or boom, if you would. There was this boom of projects included the swim gym, now known as the Monterey Sports Center, the Kennedy Road Garage, the Casanova Oklahoma Park Center, and Window on the Bay, all in that same fiscal year. The next year, in 87, 89, costs for services continued to increase and more services were provided to the community. The CIP for that biennial year exceeded $43 million, which is really remarkable when you think about the year. And in today's dollars and inflation, 43 million for one fiscal year. That would be amazing. We talked about earlier, that year, Kennedy Road Parking Garage, Hilltop Park Center, where we are today, the Community Center in New Monterey, Hartnell Gulch, the two bridges at El Estero Lake were built that year, or financed that year. Park renovations at Dennis the Menace Park, Via Paraiso Park, and also the widening of White House Curve, all good examples. in the 87-89 biennial budget. Quote, "The city's neighborhood improvement program is proving to be a successful one and one that we can all be proud of." Very true. More than $1.9 million in projects have been planned for the 87-88 fiscal year. Most of the projects are for parks, parkland acquisition, sidewalks, and walkways throughout the city's neighborhoods. It demonstrates that the city is sincere and committed to meeting the needs and desire of its citizens. That same budget, in the conclusion, did have another note as well. Quote, "Given the ambitious capital improvement projects, future planned acquisitions, and ongoing programs and services we are involved in, it is imperative that we remain sensitive to the increasing costs being incurred and the resultant increasing burden being placed on our operating budget. The operating costs associated with long-term projects must not be overlooked or discounted if we are to continue to provide the outstanding level of services and facilities the citizens have come to expect." In 1988, the Neighborhood Improvement and Community Projects Program was adopted by voters. So that's what we see today as the NCIP. It was actually back then called the NICP. The purpose of the NICP program, quote, "To ensure that a minimum portion of the city's annual budget is expended to improve the residential neighborhoods of the city and to provide for capital projects of community-wide benefit." The definition, quote, "Capital projects include but are not limited to streets, storm drains, sewers, sidewalks, lighting, traffic control devices, landscaping and beautification, parks, recreational facilities, and other public buildings." And part of that ballot measure, quote, "City council shall appropriate at least 16% of the transient occupancy tax estimated to be collected during the fiscal year to be expended on neighborhood and community improvements." And that is also when the NIPC at the time committee was formed. At least one representative per neighborhood, and the committee shall recommend a list of capital improvements desired to be accomplished in each neighborhood. And recommendations may include multi-year projects and funding. So since then, there have been a few changes. I'm not going to go through every single year. This is just kind of the earlier years up until the formation of the NCIP committee. But in 1989-81, that's when the council decided to eliminate the TOT revenue division. Remember, as I mentioned before, the TOT was broken up into these segments where 20% went to harbor and there were specific formulas. That was no longer sustainable given the flexibility that was needed into the annual budgeting. But because there was a charter amendment, the 16% of TOT formula was the only one that retained and remains today. In 1998-99, NCIP funding totaled $2.1 million. And that same year, because of very high capital needs, it took $1.2 million in general fund capital facilities reserve money to fund resurfacing municipal work to storm drain truck projects and other efforts. In 2000-2001, there was the Sports Center expansion project. And that was approved with the caveat and the reminder that, quote, "As we consider new facilities, we must not forget the associated ongoing costs." And we've gone through some hard times as a city financially over since then. 2005-06, there was the city structural imbalance of $2 million. From the budget reads, quote, "Funding for the maintenance of buildings, streets, trees, and parks projects have been cut back significantly in order to balance the budget. In time, this will take its toll and potentially create larger costs down the road." This was in 05-06. Quote, "Funding also does not currently exist for the replacement or major repair of city facilities. High-use buildings such as the Monterey Sports Center, Library, and Conference Center continue to wear out. There is currently no funding mechanism to pay for major repairs in these facilities." In 2008-2009, we're all familiar with the dot-com bust and everything else. Quote, "There's a dual challenge of increased competitiveness for qualified staff, known as the quote-unquote human infrastructure." That was how it was written in the budget. "And increased need for renewal of our streets, sewer, storm drains, and facilities in the capital infrastructure." And this is the challenge that we have to how much do we put aside towards maintaining the operations of the city, the police, fire, all those services, recreation staff, programs, but also the capital needs that we have as well. In November 2020, the year of the pandemic, voters approved Measure Y, increasing the transient occupancy tax from 10% to 12% effective January 1, 2021. So my final slide is just a summary on what I've shared so far on the history, or what I've shared today, which is that there's a recognition that insufficient funding for capital projects and deferred maintenance, this has been a challenge that dates back nearly 50 years, right, all the way back to 1978. There's a strong recognition year after year that new and existing capital facilities must be operated and maintained. And the community's goals, all of our collective goals, are to ensure that neighborhood and community facilities are adequately serving the community and that they're all well maintained. And the challenges that we have today try to strike a balance between new facilities, but also maintaining existing facilities as well as city operations as we move forward. So with that, I'm going to pass the baton over to Reggie, who's going to talk about NCIP neighborhoods and walk us through the rest of today's presentation.
Thanks, Matt. Again, my name is Reggie Paulding. I'm NCIP coordinator and senior engineer here in the city of Monterey. So right now we have 18 neighborhoods in the city. We have and we have 15 of those are represented currently with representatives, and we have openings where we're looking for representation for 2 more, which would be the which would be the Naval Support Activity Monterey, also which includes postgraduate school, and then Presidio of Monterey. Here on this slide, we have the NCIP process, which starts with appointment of committee members, which we had recently 7 new committee members, including alternates. 4-year cycle. We have an annual orientation meeting that takes place in January, and which then kicks off the season. We have a series of meetings that start with the preliminary project screening of submitted projects. That's in January, or I'm sorry, that's in February, following the submittal deadline for new projects, which is generally early February. And then we have 4 meetings specifically to review the projects. We split them up generally. We do Agua Oaks through New Monterey generally, Monterey Vista, depending on the number of projects. And then we do the second half, and we go through each project generally twice. We provide photos of projects, sites, kind of build out the description of the project, and give a rough funding requirement to complete it successfully. And then in June, we have what we call voting night. And so that was just this past June 6th, where the NCIP committee ranks the projects. This year we had roughly 80 projects that made it to voting night. And on June 6th, we went through, and it took approximately 3 hours of voting to get through all of ranked all the projects. Where we are in the program right now, we're going next to Planning Commission to get a sequel review of the projects and consistency with determine consistency with the community plans and general plans of the city. And then following that, sometime in September or October, we go to City Council to present those projects to get approval and funding. So I guess to repeat one of the slides that Nat had, qualifying projects must be capital projects, which are defined as including but not limited to public buildings and facilities, streets, storm drains, sewers, sidewalks, lighting, traffic control devices, landscaping, beautification, parks, and recreation facilities. Here, this slide kind of shows the trend of funding to the NCIP program over the years. What you'll see here in the blue, the dark blue, is how it's increased over the years with the various increases in TOT but also increases in, right, this directly correlates with increases in room rates, right? So rooms go $200 a night, $300 a night, $400 a night. That's more revenue that comes into to the program. What you see in orange is the funding that's been appropriated to the CIP from the general fund, which has stayed pretty flat, and in some cases has dropped off year over year, I guess based on other needs in the city. We wanted to point out two points in particular, the 2020 timeframe. So that funding that went to NCIP was reappropriated into the general fund due to the needs for the city. And then what you can see here, this tall peak, the green one for 2024 is roughly $4.5 million that was in the was in the NCIP fund that had not been previously appropriated to projects, which was identified and was drained for this year to fund and make available for funding the projects. And my last slide here just kind of gives you an overview of where we are today, right now in the program. So we have approximately 20 projects from what I call prior years. So anything from like 2018, 2019 that have remained on the books that we're working to complete, but haven't completed for one reason or another. And those represent roughly $4 million. We have 39 projects that were awarded and funded, approved and funded in 2024 with a value of roughly $6.3 million. Those two categories total 59 projects with roughly $10.3 million in value. Right now, today, we have roughly of the 80 projects that the NCIP committee ranked, we can realistically fund 40 of those projects with a rough budget of $11 million, which is available to NCIP right now, if we did that. That would give us, say, sometime in October, the NCIP program would have 99 projects with a budget of $21.3 million. And we do our best to work on this backlog. I work on it. I have a lot of help from my people in Parks and Rec. And we currently complete roughly 1 to 2 projects a month. So somewhere between 12 to 18 projects a year. You do the math, it takes a long time to get through 100 projects. So I think that's my last slide, and I'm gonna hand it off to Andrea.
Reggie, and you're playing musical chairs again. So good evening, council member, mayor, members of NCIP, and members of the public as well. So thank you. And I just want to give you a quick preview and recap of the city's infrastructure status. And I know we had a study session that talked about this on the 29th of May, and also during the CIP appropriation on June 4th. So with that, here is just a quick snapshot of our city infrastructure. So just to touch a little bit on each one of these segments. So our two wards, for example. So if anybody wants to venture, I guess, how many filings we have with the two warders?
500.
Thank you. Almost 2,000.
Oh.
Wow. So I know, so 1,970. Ward 1 was built in mid-1870, and the city obtained ownership in 1913. Ward 2 was built in 1926 with an expansion in late 1950s. So you can tell that those are aging infrastructures. We have a marina, so we have 414 berths and 114 moorings. We have our parking structures. We have 4 parking structures in the city of Monterey, a total of 1,955 stalls. And just to give you an idea of what prices are in this day and age, if you were to build a new parking structure, the costs range about $60,000 per parking space. So, we have 108 center line miles. So what does that mean? All the striping, all the crosswalks, raised pavement markings, curb striping, parking tees, and anybody want to venture a guess on how many signs we might have? 5,000. Almost 12,000. Those are very good guesses. So it just kind of gives you an idea of how much we have to maintain. We have, over 3,000 streetlights. We have 56 signalized intersections. With those signalized intersections, we have miles and miles of wiring that's underground. We have vehicle heads, pedestrian heads. We have fiber optics that sustain our adaptive system. There's just a lot that goes into it. We have many surface lots. Some are paid lots, some are not paid lots. We have lots such as the waterfront lot, which is one that we see all the time. We have the city hall lot, we have the library lot, we have also a lot of small lots, and we have to maintain these lots. We have 500 miles of a wonderful rec trail that needs to be maintained as well. And if you look at our sewer system, we have 100 miles of sewer system. So I was trying to put this in perspective, and I thought, okay, I'll just do a quick, very quick analysis. And if we were just, a linear lines, we go to Santa Cruz and back. So that's our sewer system. And if you look at our stormwater system, our pipes, you'd be able to get to Santa Cruz, not Santa Cruz and back. But it gives you an idea of really the magnitude of what we need to maintain. And I'll show you some more photos. And we have a lot of city facilities. We talked about the swim gym, the sports center. We have a wonderful conference center. We have recreation centers such as Hilltop, and we have the library, we have fire stations, we have historic structures, we have the police station, we have the city offices that we work in. We have a lot of parks and open spaces. We have the Menace, we have the new old Capitol site, we have windows on a bay, we have beaches. And we have Laguna Grande. So we have a lot of parks and open space that we also need to meet. So with that, I just want to say that these are working numbers. We are working on refining all of these numbers. But one of the things that I wanted to do when I became Public Works Director was to understand. We always hear kicking the can down the road. I looked at some reports, and some reports were going back to 2011 when we were saying, we need to invest in our infrastructure. And again, this is not looking back and pointing fingers at all. This is just looking forward. And how do we not pass this on to future generations of council members and staff? How do we address our aging infrastructure? So the very preliminary numbers that we started with are about 1 to 5 years, $96 million, 6+ years, $220 million. And again, as we get the estimates that we are currently working on, and here's a very comprehensive list of the things that we are looking at, we will definitely narrow down these estimates and have more backup numbers, come back to you with more refined estimates. So we know what are we looking at, what are the needs that we have for each one of these facilities in the right of way and our city facilities. What we wanted to do is just give you an order of magnitude. So we all knew that it was over $100 million, and I heard a lot of numbers over the years. So we just wanted to see, okay, which magnitude are we in here? So I just have a few photos to show you. So the photo, yep, okay. So the photo on the left, that's the tunnel. And the tunnel was built in 1968. So the good news is that structurally it's sound, but it does need a lot of work. It does need work on ventilation, the pumps, the generators, fire protection system, the lighting. There's about $3.4 million that we need in tunnel work in the next 1 to 5 years. We have our concrete streets that you can see, those are, concrete is a great way to really having a street that's gonna last a long time. However, when it is time to repair a concrete street, it is very, very expensive. So our preliminary estimates are at $12 million in the next 5 years to repair the concrete streets alone. We had a pavement condition index of about 54, which is at risk before Measure S. So thankfully we have Measure S, and Measure X, and we are able to get to 79, which is really, really good. But in order to maintain this and maintain a pavement condition index of 75, we should be investing about $5 million in our streets every year. Okay, so our signal systems. I know that during one of the presentations in the past, I showed a video of teenagers on my house. They were able to just bounce the traffic signal pole and actually make it fall down. So our infrastructure, as far as signals, signals are very expensive. We have large foundations in a built environment where we have a lot of utility complex. And as you can see from these pictures, we have a lot of work that we have to do on our signals. Okay, so that's 2,000, almost 2,000 filings. You can see we have some stringer failures, we have foul rot. There's a lot going on over the park. So we did have a assessment for the work. And unfortunately, the two wards, the assessment came back and said that they're both in poor condition. So I know we've seen what happened in Capitola, we've seen what happened in other places, so we do need to maintain our wards. We just finished phase 1 project of critical repairs at work 2, and we're going to do phase 2 on all these critical repairs to chip away at all these needs. But the estimates are pretty high, and this work is can get pretty complicated. Okay, we also have marina, and we have some issues in the boat ramp and some of the seawalls. So those are also things that we do have to maintain.
Is this the new grant?
No, not the new ramp.
Okay.
No, the new ramp is all good.
Okay.
No, that one's great, and that one's new, so that's wonderful. So for the sewer, so that's kind of the same thing that is out of sight, out of mind. One of the things that we want to flush our toilets, we want to make sure it works, and if it doesn't work, it's just really bad. So I know that council just approved the sewer rate increase, and that's going to help a lot. That was after a public process, and we also did a comprehensive sewer utility master plan. So what we estimate is that we have about 5.5 in immediate sewer to get utility needs. In long-term needs, we need about 25.6 and $2.3 million per year. But again, because we do have that sewer increase, that's going to help cover those needs. Okay, so to our storm drain system. So you can see in these pictures, we have corrosion, we have fractured concrete pipes, we have the middle picture is actually a utility company just bored through one of our lines. And so these are the things that sometimes we find quite a bit of surprises. We have rusted couplings at the pump station, we have leaky seals. And so we really need to maintain not only our storm drain system, but our pump station, because this is what happened on Del Monte when we had flooding. And this was, I'm sorry, I don't remember the year.
1999.
Thank you. And so that's what we don't want to happen. And during our storms, if pump station 11 had failed, this is what would happen to Del Monte. We have pumps at the tunnel. If those fail during our storms, the tunnel is one of the ways to get from New Monterey where we're at to the other side of Monterey besides 60, so we get cut off as well. So those are really important. That's part of the critical infrastructure that we need to maintain and keep running. And we are in the process of doing a storm utility master plan so that we can figure out exactly how much we need to invest in our storm system. So jumping back to facility conditions, this is just a quick look at the sports center. So we have boilers that we need to replace. We have leaks in the roof that we need to fix. And so the facility is starting to age and we do need to maintain it. This is also Monterey Sports Center. You can see that the paint is starting to bubble up. There's humidity. We are working on a new dehumidifier. We also need to address forward plastering, for example. And so there's just a lot of work that needs to be done at the Monterey Sports Center as well. This is right outside. So if you right go home, take a quick look and you'll see that staff does tell us that they have to get buckets when it's raining. We do have a lot of leaks in the roof. We don't know really what the condition of the structural part of the roof is right now, so we need to explore that as well. The picture that you see on the left is the HVAC system, so that's outdated and also needs to be replaced. We also have a sewer line that runs under the basketball courts that needs to be replaced because we do get a lot of backups here too, sewer backups. Parking garages, we have cracks on our slabs, we have some sagging, we have exposed rebar, and we're doing, again, all of these facilities are going through an assessment so that we know exactly what we need to address, and we have an idea of how much it's going to cost. This is one of our restrooms in Kenner Road, so you can see that the humidity and the washing of the floors is causing some damage, so we need to take care of those facilities as well. And fire stations, I am very grateful that NCIP did vote for the fire station project. It was one of the highest voted projects, and together with some CIP money, we hope that we can make a really big difference. I know we had a huge leak at the fire station where I showed a video in a previous presentation. You can see water flowing from the ceiling. So this is really great because obviously our firefighters, they live there, they respond to emergencies, and it's just, I'm very grateful that it was such a highly rated project that we can address these. And we do have a brochure that summarizes what we just talked about. So if you go to monterey.gov/finance, you'll be able to see a snapshot of some of these pictures and the information. And with that, I will turn it over to Hans.
Well, I start where Andrea left off, just to remind you where we are. This is also a project that the NCIP has voted on to invest money into this Hilltop Park Center. Next slide, please. And I'll show you some more of Hilltop Park. What you see on the left-hand side is where the rain penetrates the hallway. There's actually a second photo where we have big rain barrels in the middle of this hallway then running to ensure that the kids don't fall or slip and slide over it. Here you see some of the wall coverings outside getting loose from the wall. And of course, on the right hand side, you see one of those beams again that is rotted by the termites. Next slide. The Nat was talking about that 1980, 1981 vote, and in the next slide, Nat, I want to highlight this again. This didn't come overnight. This has been foreseen by previous city councils, city managers, previous residents. This has not come overnight. This is something that we saw coming. And, we were probably all swept in the moment. Let's get the next best shiny thing. Let's do this. Let's build a sports center. Let's expand the sports center immediately after we opened it. It was a great idea. It's a great idea still, but we got swept up in the moment. We did a lot of those things and we kicked the can down the road over and over and over again. One of the neighborhood presidents is Tom Reeves, and when he puts on his hat, which is I remember when I was city engineer, he will share with you how we struggled with that in engineering, that we have to do things, but other things go over and we never had enough fun. We have to do something. And we cannot just sit here and create another nice budget message. I put it in the budget message. I feel good about it. I know nothing will happen. We have to work on that. So next slide. So here's where the neighborhood community improvement program can play a role. And it's all about balancing. It's all about how are we balancing certain things. Ned pointed out to all of you that the intent was to ensure that the neighborhoods catch up. There was a sentiment in the communities in the 70s, in the 80s, maybe even in the 90s, that the city was overlooking certain neighborhoods. We need to do more in the neighborhoods. We need to have more sidewalks. We need to have more playgrounds. We need to do more things in our neighborhoods. That's done. We've done that. There's always the next shiny thing you can do, but the original intent to push funding into neighborhoods has been accomplished. Now you may shake your head and me say, no, there's so much more to do. I believe you, there's so much more to do. When I walk through my neighborhood in New Monterey, I can tell you where wishes are, but we have to go back to the budget message. We have to go back to stating what is better for us right now. Reinvest in what we have and then see what is left over, or or continuing the spending spree and creating a huge crisis for the city. So the purpose of the NCIP was in the city charter to ensure that a minimum portion of the city's annual budget goes to improve residential neighborhoods and to provide for capital projects of community-wide benefit. And you, the NCIP reps, what's your job? Your job is, according to the city code, you shall represent the interests of all residents and property owners within the jurisdiction. You do not represent the interest of any neighborhood associations with their jurisdiction, if any. What do they want to say with that? They want to say, you have to look what is important for the city, you have to look what is important for the neighborhood, and sometimes that may be the same what a neighborhood association would like you to do, but the one or the other are not connected. They are separated, and this may not be very popular to say, but you have to understand at the end of it, the city powers wanted, together with the resident, create a committee that looks out for neighborhood and citywide, community-wide projects as well. So next slide, please. Here's what I told the council and the public in April. We don't have an expenditure challenge. We do not have a revenue problem, I'm sorry. We have an expenditure problem. We're spending too much money. We have too much stuff. Andrea just showed you what we have as stuff. And we have to figure out a way how we jointly can compromise, balance, and reinvest into our existing structures. And we have done a great job on that this past June meeting when we had the NCIP also allocating funding towards large-scale facilities. Next slide. And with that, I want to lead it over to the council. When I look at the NCIP as a city employee who has been working in the city for quite some time, when I look at the NCIP committee as a city manager, I know that the NCIP is the only challenging board commission that we have in the city. There's not a single staffer who is happy when they get assigned to the NCIP. There's not a single staffer who is happy when he or she gets assigned to the NCIP. Why is that? The NCIP is easy to criticize everyone who stands in front of them. We had an NCIP coordinator who described the NCIP the following way. Every time I go to the NCIP, it's like standing in front of a firing squad. That's the truth. That's the reputation of the NCIP. The expectation of the NCIP is whatever we want, the council has to rubber stamp. That's the expectation of past NCIPs and committees. And if you don't rubber stamp it, we'll make sure at the election time what we feel about your actions. Staff shouldn't make any proposals. We heard this from you. Why is staff making proposals? What do we hear when we don't make a proposal? Well, council, this year we didn't get any proposals from staff. What do you want? Make the proposals from us, not proposals. I've heard it all. NCIP committees in the past were outright disrespectful to city employees. The city attorney is out to lunch. We need to get rid of the city attorney. Those words were spoken by NCIP committee members. There's little to no correction by then the chairperson. So, we have a big infrastructure challenge that we need to tackle together. We have to also look at ourselves, and we need to find a way to come together as a community. And we need to find a way how we balance in the best interest of our city and future generations our demands that the infrastructure is imposing on us. This is not staff. This is the stuff we have. And if we want to continue sticking our head in the sand, that's not the path forward that I would like to suggest to the council. So with that, I hand it over to the mayor.
Thank you, Hans. Thank you, staff, for the presentation. We open up to the council for questions. Comments, no questions. All right, are there any questions at this time? No questions? Anybody on NCIP has a question?
So as chair of the NCIP, I want to put in that we, the NCIP, had asked for this meeting. So we were really thrilled when the city coordinator.
Sorry, Jamie, real quick. I don't want to cut you off, but I just want to make sure that we stick to questions at this point. And so if you have a question, I'll let you finish off, but if not, I'm maybe ask you to hold off until we come back with public comments, then we'll go to the comments.
So I do, my question was, where is the presentation from the NCIP? The city didn't coordinate with NCIP. We didn't have a chance to get ours in. I have a presentation too, to provide information, and we weren't given any opportunity. So we're going right to comment without the joint participation of the two bodies, and I don't understand.
So what I will say, and I don't want to answer for staff, but NCIP is part of the city of Monterey, just like the council is. So the council didn't prepare a presentation, and I'm not sure, did you reach out to anybody on staff to share your interest in?
My presentation is here, so we're ready to
No,
go.
but to clarify my question, did you ask staff, did you give staff a heads up that you wanted to present something?
So no, I didn't, because I thought that we were going to be able to present.
Okay, well, we'll all have a time to talk, and so we'll go around and have that conversation. So, did you have any other questions at this time?
I guess, did the city reach out to the NCIP to help in the coordination of this?
We gave you our presentation, and as the mayor pointed out, we are happy to listen to your presentation.
So we got the presentation.
I'm sensing, I'm trying to find a space to bring us together. And I'm sensing that we're already trying to start off on the space of pitting sides against each other, and that's why we're not here. So if in any way you feel like the staff or the council wasn't participatory in reaching out, it goes both ways, right? So you could have easily reached out to staff beforehand if you felt like there wasn't proactive nature in reaching out to the NCIP members in regards to organizing or planning for today's meeting. Same with the council. Any of the council members could have reached out to staff and communicated our desire to prep and organize the meeting in any way that we wanted to. So we all have that option available to us. And I just ask that we don't sit here tonight and point fingers at folks. We sit here, we try to find a space of being productive. Any other questions? Please.
This is gonna sound weird, but you were talking about the cement streets. Is there a reason why you can't just pave over cement streets? You're saying you have to repair the cement streets, so it has to be cement?
Yes, so that's a great question. What happens is, most of the experiences that we have, if we pave over concrete, there's not a bonding between, the asphalt cover and the concrete, so it just starts peeling off in chunks. We are looking into if there are better ways with primers or bonding or other things, or micro grinding and then paving. So those are things that we look at as well. But sometimes when we do have the concrete streets, if they are uneven, even things like Caltrans, you know, they go over and they do micro grinding on their highways. We have to look at, like we do on our streets, is what we do is we do these big squares, and we have to fix the big squares so that we can have a street that we can pave over. So there's a lot of work, and we're looking at different things. Things change all the time. We've had success on some sections, like on Franklin, and then we've had no success in some other sections. So we are looking at that as well.
Okay.
Can we hear what the city, what changes the city has decided in regards to the budget to try to increase the funds for the CIP?
We have been very careful in staffing decisions. We are very conscientious in how we are staffing back certain departments. You heard on Tuesday we had a show and tell by Parks and Recreation, because it's Park and Recreation Month. The sports center was pre-COVID staffed with 29 full-time employees. We have now 7 full-time employees there running the sports center. We still have not fully staffed Casanova Open Park Center. We used to have a full-time employee there. We have restaffed in certain areas. Our maintenance staff is fully staffed because we need to have maintenance there. But in certain other areas, again, we are very slimly staffed. So that's one element. We try also on the other side to find service providers that can provide the same service at a lesser cost, and try to work with that. Over the years, we have done this very conscientiously by having others doing the jobs that we traditionally did. For instance, street sweeping is done for almost 10 years now by Monterey City Disposal. We have to try to free up other job functions in the city. But the cost, of course, of the maintenance of the infrastructure keeps rising. And so while we are doing a good job in trying to free up money, we also had the funding always for CIP, and Tom Reeves will testify in revival to that, was kind of frozen at $1.5 million. Our general fund CIP was 1.5. Last year, or 2 years ago, I think we started to bring it up to 2 million, then to 2.5 million now. We are carefully trying to adjust the funding. We also did a good job, in creating reserves. So if we have a challenge with the sports center now, we have a pretty good reserve there of, I think, almost $3 million sitting there that helped us to maintain that building. We have reserves also for different other facilities, for instance, for the conference center. We have a library reserve that is slowly growing. So we are stashing money aside, especially the one-time savings that we can identify and put this towards infrastructure. Measure P and S have been really a great gift by the taxpayers. Measure P and S will expire in 2027, but that is a 1% sales tax that brings us about $10 to $12 million a year right now, which goes all into road maintenance, storm drain maintenance, ADA improvements, and traffic light improvement. So we are fine on the road improvements right now, thanks to Measure P and S. But again, to maintain a building like that, to maintain a fire station like that, we cannot do it just with the existing funding that we have available right now. So yes, we're trying to figure it all out at the same time to make it happen. But there are only so many magical steps we can take to make it happen without reduction of service levels. We can close facilities. We can close a fire station on Hawthorne Street because through the collaboration with Pacific Grove, there is a fire station that's close by. Now, how well would this go over with my neighbors in New Monterey if we would say we close your fire station? Because there's a fire station a mile away in PG. It wouldn't go over well. So we have to balance the community expectations, the community service levels with our budget. And again, I appreciate the question so very much, and I know I went on too long, but I really think we're trying to figure it out, and we need your help to continue to figure it out.
If I could just add a little bit, Hans, and correct me if I'm wrong, but what I recall is I think we're somewhere around 40 million in reserves this year because of the reserve funds that we created. That includes the emergency, the rainy day fund too. So I don't think the delta is there. But I know significant funding has been set aside over the last several years for that. And then when we look at the library, recreation, and sports center, there's been significant reduction in staffing to those departments as well, which are also beloved programs within the city of Monterey. I just kind of want to read these numbers off. The first number I'm going to read is the staffing levels for those programs in 1921, so pre-COVID, and then 24-25, so this current budget. So library went from 18.75 FTEs to 14, reduction to 4.75. Recreation went from 15.75 to 10.09, so a reduction of 5.66. The sports center went from 30.5 to 10.33, so a reduction of 20. So lots of reductions, and I think staff has done a really great job of trying to not only cut expenditures, but I think the city has worked well in trying to increase revenue too, which the increase in sales tax and NCIP, which also provided rental funding to NCIP. Pretty much all that funding has been used to help support our reserve policy that we've established.
I do have one final question. I guess I'm really confused what the purpose of this meeting is, or what the outcome, or like what's expected to be the outcome of this meeting. Because I'm trying to keep it to a question. So I guess it would be helpful to maybe hear, and maybe that comes at the end after all the comments. But it's, I feel kind of confused.
The NCIP wanted to meet with the city council. The NCIP was proposing this in the context of the budget hearing when we presented our case for infrastructure needs. And, today, what we try to do as staff is set build the foundation for the future needs of the city and for what we think is probably a foundation for you, the NCIP members, to engage with the city council and say, okay, here's what we think, here's what is important. We heard what staff was presenting, but here's where we think maybe a balance can be struck. This is your opportunity as NCIP representatives to share this with the council, because again, some of you expressed the need to calibrate expectations from the NCIP and between the NCIP and the city council and possibly staff. So the objective is to enter into a dialogue where the council can very carefully listen and also ask questions, and also express what the council feels is important for the community.
Thank you.
Yeah, now I would just echo that. I mean, I think there was a lot of comments at the meeting that you attended when we last talked about this, and there was a lot of desire to have a discussion together. And then I think when it came back to the council after public comment, there was a lot of agreement from the council that, yeah, let's have a meeting so we can discuss next steps. So I think we were all part of that same conversation around trying to figure out how to work together and move forward. Any other questions? All right, let's open it up for public comment. Who's interested in speaking during public comment? Could we maybe start a lineup to the left of the podium, please?
Good evening, Mayor.
Hold on one second. I'll let you know once we can start. Could we maybe cut the slides? Yes. So make sure that folks in the public can maybe be orderly engaged here. Oh, okay, thank you. And then while folks are lining up here in the room, if folks are participating via Zoom, you can use the raise hand function. So we're gonna do this just like how we do in council meetings, where we want everybody to identify themselves up front. Then we'll cut off the opportunity for additional folks to be able to add after that point. So is there anybody that's still sitting that wants to speak? The bottom of the front, anybody else? I only see the one hand from folks that are sitting.
And maybe you all can ask, on Zoom, to raise your hand.
I just did it here. Okay, so Bob is the only person that's not standing that's gonna speak?
Yes.
You can sit. Do you want to sit? Well, are you gonna speak?
Yes, please.
You can sit for now, and then when the line is done, you're gonna jump up. Or you can go, well, you're already sitting. I was gonna say you can go before Louise. I apologize. I don't want to make both musical chairs. So how many do we have standing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm saying standing. How many are standing? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7, 8, 9. We have 9 folks. Okay, we have how many? Okay, so I'm gonna do a countdown online for folks on Zoom. Do a countdown to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have 2 on Zoom. All right. Luis, the floor is yours.
Mayor, thank you. I'm
Sorry, real quick. 3 minutes, we'll do 3 minutes, and then is there a public way that folks can see? Okay, perfect. Please.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, and NCIP committee members. I apologize, I jumped in too much excitement. I'm a previous member of the NIP committee, as it was called back in the 90s and early 2000s. Also former ARC member and former planning commissioner. So the issue here tonight appears to be the use of NIC funds, if I read the staff report correctly, to fund ongoing maintenance needs for the city, including previously approved facilities from the NICP, which by definition become public facilities. I have to say that this issue has been ongoing for many years. This is not a new issue. Everybody in the room knows this. Just like many other discussions in the city, these are recurring issues. I remember from the nineties and early 2000s having this same conversation. And some people are hesitant to allocate NCIP funds to public maintenance, to maintenance of public facilities. And that shouldn't be the case. I don't think the NCIP is a recommending body to the city council. The NCIP is not a decision-making body of the city. That is very clear. And so technically, from a city administration perspective, it is within the realm of the decision-making body of the city council to decide how this money is used. There's no discussion about that. Now, whether some people believe that will get rid of democracy in town, well, that's their opinion, but that is not the case. Now, unless it's inconsistent with the city charter, the council has full authority in the allocation of funds from the NIC portion of the TOT. Now, the NICP fund is not a sacred cash cow. And some people seem to think that that's the case. This is a distorted notion of democracy. One recommendation is that the city can allocate annually a percentage of the NCIP fund to public maintenance facility. To public facility maintenance, I apologize. That, because the need for maintenance is there. I mean, it's all documented. There's no quims about it. So that would be something that the city council could do. Upon a recommendation each year from the staff, this is what we see that we need to do this year. And you allocate 20% of the NIC fund to city maintenance. That way, it's all done. And it's this issue, the community has to come to grips with it. There's no point in discussing it anymore.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Tom Reeves. I've submitted written comments to you, so I ask that you please read those comments. I won't regurgitate those comments, though. I'd like to address some things that were said earlier today. The city manager, my dear friend Hans, made some statements that some of which I agree with and some of which I don't agree with. I agree with him that over the years, the city council has approved certain projects that are, as Hans calls it, the shiny project. And as a former staff member, I remember thinking, now, this is great. We've got a sports center. How are we going to maintain this thing? As I said in my letter, we've built the Beverly Hills, but we have a working man's budget. So that is part of the problem. I understand the need for it. There've been great city assets. I love the recreation trail. Everybody does. But we didn't look down the road to figure out how we're going to pay for that. I will fervently disagree with the city manager, though, on that there are no more needs in these neighborhoods. That is a complete misrepresentation. I can walk you down numerous streets in this neighborhood that are still 24 feet wide, where you can't get an ambulance and a fire truck down that street when there are cars parked on both sides. It still floods in front of my house, despite there being an NIP funded project to address the problem. Okay, that came through the NIP, not the city council, not any other means, didn't come from the Stormwater Fund. It came through the citizens and the NIP committee approving that project. And I still get flooded. It needs more work to be done. So that's a complete misrepresentation. There are plenty more projects that need to be addressed, and the NIP is one of those main funding sources. These people in the NIP committee are all mature, reasonable adults. They've made good decisions over the years. I've been in Reggie's seat. I've been the NIP staff person. I'm the person that received some arrows. And you know what else I also said? They're all good people. In the end, some of them, I pulled the arrow out of my butt. I said, well, okay, I lived through that one, just like I've lived through other adversities in life. And overall, this committee's done a great job. And I wish they'd quit being vilified as if they're the demon that is driving the city into financial ruin. They are not. The city council makes the decision on the budget. It rests with the city council. So if you don't like a project and you think it's going to be a heavy maintenance project, don't allow it. Hans remembers this, I'm sure. I wanted to have a caboose behind the train in Del Monte Park and Dennis Meadows Park because the kids couldn't play on the locomotive. The city council said no. Great, good decision. Can't afford the maintenance. Thank you.
Pat Benza, Monterey Vista past NCIP rep, and I'm directing this to members of the NCIP committee. For a long time, I have been saying that NCIP is broken. Not broken in the way that staff is asking for it to be fixed by lessening the amount going to NCIP, but rather it needs to be fixed by working within the NCIP program and what are the staff capabilities. My biggest problem with NCIP is that more and more projects get added to the list. Last year, the largest number of projects was done at, I believe, 15, and I think Reggie kind of confirmed that tonight. It is deceptive to the residents who submit projects that they're going to see action just because they're funded. And we know there's projects on the list for 10 years now, and they may never get done. That is not fair for people submitting projects. I think the responsibility of NCIP is to come up with some ideas on fixing it. Don't continue down the same path. There has to be a way to fix it. If you don't, I'm afraid that the staff and city council will be taking TOT away from NCIP, would have to go before the voters, and that is not the answer. I want to throw out just one possible solution, and it may not work, but I think I'm trying to think outside of the box and get this thing to work. Here's an example. At the beginning of NCIP year, the committee needs to be told that the staff can complete, and I'm just coming up with a number, 20 projects in the next year. The committee needs to decide how many of the projects from previous years they want completed and how many new projects they want to see completed that year. Let's just say the committee decides they want to see 10 old projects be completed and 10 new ones. Because neighborhoods didn't like the $50,000 minimum that was suggested somewhere along the way, it doesn't matter the size of the project. There's 10 projects. Held back will be big projects like undergrounding, forest management, or some other huge project like the pickleball facility or the traffic calming on Mar Vista in our neighborhood that needs to be done that's going to cost millions. So the committee would have 8 projects of any size that will be funded. And then the rest of the money would go into these big projects, whether it be undergrounding, one of our favorites, or forest management, or another huge project. But only 10 projects would be approved because that's all the staff can do with new ones. And then they would do 10 old ones. I just want you to think about it.
Sorry, that's time.
Okay, think about out of the box ways to fix
Thank
it.
you, Pat. Appreciate you.
I'm gonna talk here so everybody can hear me. I'm Jean Rash, Monterey Vista. I was on NCIP for 9 years. There are problems with NCIP, and if I have time, I'll touch on them. But what we were really, really good at is process and listening. It has always been that anyone could submit a project, and those get reviewed, okay? What we would ask of the city is if you need something, submit a project. Tell us what you need, us, I still see myself as NCIP. Tell us what you need, follow the procedures, it will get evaluated by the NCIP committee. We want to collaborate with you. okay? We're here to get along, we know the city needs things. Here's the things that are problems. Asking just blatantly for $2 million. That was a problem. Coming up with an out of calendar idea, not coming in at the beginning of the NCIP process. It was really hard, especially for Rick and I, when staff submitted a brand new idea out of nowhere to regrade the ravines up by Dry Creek. It had never been on the schedule. Most of you don't even know about it. We came in and said, you're off calendar, you're out of order. We can't bring it in at this point. And there was this outrage, everybody was upset. The public never even knew it happened because it got canceled. So if you would help us follow procedures, understand the NCIP project, submit what the city needs, we're gonna evaluate it. The NCIP is gonna evaluate it just like we do any other project, and it will be considered. We have always been collaborative. We got the 2 fire stations, 11 and 12, $2.25 million. Don't tell me we aren't collaborative. You asked for the dehumidifier, we gave it. Please just respect the process, submit your ideas, they will be collaboratively entertained, and we can continue to get along.
Members of the council, my name is Rick Hoyer. I have a little experience with NCIP. That's my joke for the day. I want to thank the presentation you gave, at least the first part of it, before it became condescending and insultful to previous NCIP members. One thing was left out. There was, in addition to Measure Y, there was also Measure G that same year, which was a sales tax increase. All told, the tax increases that year was well over $5 to $7 million in new revenue. As Hans indicated, a lot of that apparently has gone into reserves, which is great. So now if a major thing happens, they can fix things. It would have been helpful to public that at the time as well. A chart that should have been up here, and rather than the very misleading one that shows this big line of NCIP way above CIP and how it's going up, is general fund went up every one of those years as well, because NCIP is a percentage of the TOT. So for that to go up, the entire general fund had to go up. Council chose not to spend it on CIP projects. That's council's prerogative to do, and all. That's not NCIP's problem. We're not to blame for causing the problem because our budget's been going up and CIP hasn't. We have no control over what's spent on CIP. General fund has gone up, and yes, we're less people, but where has all that extra money gone? Is the question mark that a lot of people are asking. I'm sure there's a good answer, but that plays right into what's maintained or not. Also, this whole idea of maintenance, in many ways, is a red herring in a number of ways. It is needed, don't get me wrong. But this current cycle that isn't quite yet finished until the August meeting, which unfortunately Reggie missed, 50% of projects in this thing are maintenance projects. The previous year, 40% were maintenance projects. We have funded large dollars for maintenance every single year. And any new project that comes to city council also shows you what is the estimated maintenance cost of that project. It's your choice. Do we want to do it? By saying we know what the cost is going to be, we've chosen to take that on. Or you could say, nope, that project's too much, drop it off the list and those funds go back to NCIP. That's your prerogative to do. So this aspect of placing NCIP and the commissioners as being the bad guy in the fact that the city has not maintained its facilities, I'm sorry, we work hard to try to maintain and build things in the city, and a lot of things, particularly in the sports center, not just the dehumidifiers. Those locker rooms were redone by NCIP. That was a major maintenance aspect because they were falling apart. We do maintenance projects every single year. So to come up with this thing that we're the cause of huge maintenance from, I'm sorry, is a bit disingenuous.
Good evening, my name is Adam Finteritz. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but it was a little irksome, to be honest. I used to work in local government. And when I worked in local government, it was understood that we were here to serve the people, and that included listening to them regardless of where their First Amendment took them. So short of outright vulgarity or threats, we took it. I don't know, maybe things have changed in local government since I was an employee, not of this city, but of other local governments. So that to me just irked me a little bit that there's this perception or narrative that comments should be taken personally. No, it's the job of a public servant to not take these kinds of comments personally. The NCIP is doing its job. They're passionate members of the community who are dedicated volunteers who frankly are combined way more knowledgeable than me or anyone frankly on the dais. I'm sorry, right? We have more combined experience in this room and knowledge of this city. That's just objectively true. So I really hope that maybe we can hit the reset button tonight and focus on listening to these very experienced and dedicated community members. I think they have a lot to say, given that they would have liked to, some of them at least, would have liked to have given a presentation. And you know, if someone's been asking for months or was it years for a meeting, I just found out about this 24 hours ago, and I know that's the minimum notice required for this type of meeting, but you know, maybe it would have been appropriate for more notice and for more communication and coordination with NCIP people so that they can be heard too, because what I'm hearing so far is just kind of, as other commenters have said, it's just sort of the city talking down to these people, and I don't think that's the direction anyone's trying to take this. So maybe in good faith, we can all just hit the reset button on this conversation and focusing on listening to the people in this room.
So I would like to thank you for finally putting together this meeting. Please, thank you. This is the way to do things. I mean, it's just too bad that you chose to disrespect NIP and CIP by attempting to blindside, step on, and eviscerate NIP, both the program and the representatives. Now, why did we come up on the 6th at the council meeting, NIP reps and whoever, neighborhoods, why were we so angry? Why? That's why. Because we had, you know, not good what you tried to do. This is good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Roberta Myers and I live in New Monterey. The stated purpose of this meeting, it seems, fourfold. An overview of NCIP, city infrastructure needs, NCIP program status, and the council's expectations regarding NCIP. I think NCIP is an innovative program designed to give neighborhoods some say in neighborhood enhancements. It had a structure outlined in the city charter involving nominated representatives studying and ranking projects, which were then decided upon by the city council with provisions that unfunded NCIP projects monies could be used in an emergency by a 4-5 vote, 4/5 vote of the council. In the very real COVID emergency, the council actually did more than that by defunding NIP projects to use the money. It was a real crisis. The city now has a profound infrastructure need. As a homeowner, I am advised to save 1 to 4% of the value of my property each year for repair and replacement. Clearly, the city's CIP contribution of $2 million per year is not enough money. CIP funding should be realistic and ongoing with long-term aims in mind. NCIP's annual income of around $6 million must look attractive, but it won't begin to solve a projected need of $98 million in the next 5 years. The city seems to expect that killing NCIP stepwise, making drastic personnel changes mid-program, implying that NCIP has somehow caused or contributed the lack of infrastructure funding, and by suggesting committee term limits and projecting cost limitations, restricting real neighborhood projects will solve its lack of fiscal planning. It won't solve it. You can kill NCIP and there's not going to be enough money to do what you need to do. I hope the council won't co-opt NCIP funding. And I certainly hope citizenry will not vote for the necessary charter amendments allowing it. Thank you.
I'm not sure I can actually get up at this point. So, my name is Bob Evans. I live about 4 blocks from here. I think it's, Shaneri asked the question, why are we here? This combined meeting came out of a discussion at the council meeting where there was a proposal to change the charter that describes the NCIP program. I think well, we've just begun the discussion as far as I'm concerned. I think that the NCIP commission or committee has done a journeyman's job at trying to evaluate all of the projects that were put before it. I think, and they, based on the presentation by the various proposers, have in the past ranked those, and then that ranking goes to the city council, and the city council in the past has pretty much gone with all the projects that got down to the amount of money that was available that year. That can happen every year. The city, if there's a city project, if Andrea has a project that is just screaming in her ears every day, then she should be at the NIP committee lobbying the committee, presenting the data so that the committee then gives that a #1 ranking. This neighborhood proposed a project for this center because it leaks. And you saw some of the pictures. And one of the things that needs to be done before we spend a lot of money on this is a seismic analysis. And so that was part of our project. And I don't know whether our project got approved or not. But what? It did. It did. Okay, that's super. And that, by the way, is a maintenance project as well as an improvement project. So the neighborhood is looking after its facility. And I don't think we need to change the charter with NIP. What we need to do is talk to one another more. Staff to NIP, NIP to the council. Thank you. We'll take it online now.
We have, first speaker is Esther Malkin. Esther.
Good evening, everybody. Esther Malcolm, president of the Laguna Grande Neighborhood Association. I just want to first and foremost thank everybody who has served on NCIP in the past, and particularly welcome the new people that are on board. And not to be scared by this kind of craziness that they're walking into. That is a very unfortunate start to their service. This has gotten so contentious for a variety of reasons, but at the end of the day, we all care about our city. We all care about our neighborhoods. We've got to find a better way of communicating. I personally would have really wanted to hear what NCIP chair presentation had to say about all of this, because I think that it's very one-sided to present this. The Nat's presentation was excellent, and I'm pretty sure that NCIP's presentation was going to be really good as well. I want to thank Reggie also, because he and other engineers have put up with a lot, and I'm not talking about, being talked down to or any of that kind of stuff. They do a good job with what they have to work with. And I, for one, am very grateful to him and to NCIP for funding a number of programs in my neighborhood that in the past never would have even gotten past the rep that we had before. So I just think that we all have to take a deep breath and find a way to communicate better, to be less contentious, and approach this in a way that benefits everybody. It's not anybody's fault that previous administrations decided to kick the can down the road, and that now we are stuck with what we have to deal with. It's not the current NCIP members' fault. It's not the current council's fault. It's not even the staff's fault. It is the administration that created NCIP without having the guidelines in place to keep us from getting to a potential infrastructure and financial crisis. So ultimately, I think we all need to approach this from a space of wanting to have our city get its needs met. And all of the residents and all of the committees and everybody should have that as the first and foremost goal, and not turn this into a tug of war between City Hall and NCIP reps. And I'll just stop there. And again, please, let's try and find a fix for this.
Thank you, Esther. Next speaker, Lori Mizuko. Lori, go ahead.
Good evening. Well, I'm going to first start with agreeing, applauding, and appreciating all the commenters tonight before me. And not going to repeat a lot of what they said, but I will definitely chime in on the last person, Esther, who I completely 100% agree with. And I'm just going to start with the whole premise of joint meeting. And by definition, joint means shared, held, or made by two or more together. Together meaning togetherness. So I was looking for both sides. I think it's only fair. I'm really saddened, most of all, to see that the comments coming from the city manager and the mayor tonight were so dismissive and felt very finger pointing and do not feel collaborative at all to me. And nothing about tonight feels like togetherness. So I'm disgusted, disappointed, and saddened, and agree 100% with Esther, and I believe Adam Pinteritz hit on this too. We just need to take it down a notch, take a deep breath, find a way to work together. It isn't anybody's fault, and we all need to come together to get there. And taking money away from the neighborhoods is not going to solve the problem. It'll just make things more contentious. So Jean Rash laid it out very well. Use the process. Let's see if we can do it together using the process. And lastly, I would like to see and hear what Jamie Fields, the NCIP chair, prepared to present. And I'd like to listen to it, and I'd like to see it. And I know she worked on it hard. I don't think people should have to get things through osmosis that, oh, you're supposed to contact the city to ask for a presentation. I mean, it's a joint meeting. So please, I'm asking you, let Jamie present her deal, and let's all come together and take the temperature down. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori, and so that concludes online public comment.
Awesome, thank you, thank you. All right, so my thought is, it would be helpful to hear from NCIP, and I think it's appropriate to start with Jamie. I just want to clarify, in no way am I intending to shut you down. And I'm not casting blame in any way. You started your comments off by, indicating that staff never reached out. So I'm just trying to avoid us pointing fingers both ways. So by all means, if you have a presentation that you want to provide, maybe you can connect it with staff. I think it's appropriate for you to start off, and then after you're done, we'll go around to the rest of the NCIP members, and then we'll end with the council and see if we can engage in a little bit of a conversation. Does that seem reasonable to everybody? Any additional feedback before we begin the process here? Okay, did you?
It's in an email box somewhere.
So email box and
let me, thank you so much. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to the staff. They've just been absolutely amazing. And if you listen to the public comments in the NCIP, you'll hear that night after night after night. This is already written 10 times. Also, welcome to all our new members. Thank you for being here. This is our first meeting together with you. This is not a normal meeting. We'll do most of our business the next meeting, okay? So don't feel like you're floating and you don't know why. And also I apologize for confusion to the mayor and city council. NCIP asked for this meeting repeatedly in April and May during their normal cycle, long before the budget meeting. So when this was put on the agenda, that's what I thought this was. And the reason that NCIP asked for this is because they were hoping that by clarifying with council how NCIP works, the council will be able to understand why the ideas being discussed by the city kind of go against the principles of NCIP in some ways. And in turn, NCIP was hoping to move the council to feel, as we representatives do, that the integrity of the program is important to uphold. That's why we asked for this meeting way back. So to that end, I made a presentation. It's got like 3 slides. So you guys all outclassed me incredibly. So go to the first slide.
great. And you might share this with you again.
All 3 of them. And by the way,
Somebody can roll that.
no, let me share. So this is a big one. And actually, I wrote this. So I actually put this together because I tend to speak really fast and then nobody's heard what I say. So I want to slow down.
Give me 1 second to hide this video, loading meeting control. There you go. You should have.
All right, super duper. So what I wanted to tell you was first the history of NCIP. Then how the NCIP represents the desires of the city's residents. Give an example that's been talked about a lot before the budget meeting. And then summary. So history of NCIP, 2 bullets. 1, it was created to help neighborhoods offset the impact of tourism as the city made a shift from the fishing industry to the tourist industry because it needed to look for new revenues. So this was a way to help offset that impact, and that NCIP committee talks about that all the time. It also, by the way, generates support for a TOT tax increase when you're asking for one. So just keep that in your pocket. So that's the history of NCIP in a nutshell. NCIP represents the desires of the citizens. Anyone in the city can propose a project. As stewards of public funds, NCIP representatives spend hours vetting every project. And every resident in every neighborhood is asked to give their vote and their opinion. Those citizens are prioritized. It's not tied down to one group, every single person. And the reason there's so many people at this table is because these people have to be able to reach everybody else. It takes a lot of people moving together to reach those people, have those conversations, and get that output. So as representatives, new people, it's your job to get the input of everybody. It's not your job to make any decisions yourself. Okay? Now, an example that's been thrown out is maintenance. And so this is where the NCIP was really feeling like there's a misunderstanding. Just going back and counting over 14 years, 55% of the number of projects that were funded by NCIP were maintenance projects. And that means that more than 55% of the funds spent by NCIP were maintenance funds, because those maintenance projects are really big. And I didn't have time to try and dig out back in 2006 and 2007 the dollar amounts. To bring this back to Reggie's really good slide, he had a slide that talked about funding every year. There was a short orange, there's a really tall purple, and at the back there was a green. If you take the maintenance and cut that off the purple, you will put more to the orange than was already in the orange. And again, you'll take the purple to far less than half. So the amount of funding that NCIP is doing on maintenance is huge. And you haven't seen the results yet, but all of that green was given directly back to the city for its priority projects this funding cycle. So that's got to be cleaned up. The numbers are getting trimmed up right now. Then they get confirmed by the NIP in August, then you'll see it. So the NCIP people are doing maintenance all the time. So to do a simple conversation about putting maintenance charge onto it doesn't make a lot of sense because it's already maintenance. And so this is why the NCIP wanted to be here to talk with the city council tonight, because it was seeing this conversation during its project cycle in March and April and May. And it knew that the city council didn't really have a good hold on what it was that the NCIP was doing. And you can ask any new rep, it takes a couple of years for a rep to get a hang of it too. So, that's completely understandable, but that's why. So in conclusion, NCIP is unique. It's a vital part of the city. The representatives act as connectors and guides between the neighborhoods and the people living in them, all the people, and the city's large organizational structure. Each citizen gets a voice about their opinions and their desires, even as the city voices its priorities. NCIP is not material to the city, but it's very material to the citizens. And so since I'm an accountant, I got to close with one little slide here, got a pie chart. The size of the city's current budget is over 200 million. The average funding for NCIP is between 4 and 6. We are not going to move the needle on the city. We're a tiny, tiny part. But NCIP is absolutely unique, absolutely vital, and makes a big difference to every single citizen in the city the way it stands, without change and without maintenance, because that's what we do every time, all the hours, all year. That's my presentation. And so I had thought, since this was a joint meeting, then that we would be going back and forth. So I turn it back to you, and thank you for that time.
Thank you very much. So I'm getting some communication from staff around the need to go back out for public comment within the presentation. So I'm going to open it back up. I just asked us to be mindful of the time because I want to make sure that we give ourselves enough time to engage in back and forth. So I'm going to limit it to 1 minute. So if you have any additional comments, I'm going to open it back up for public comment. So anybody can speak during public comment. Is there anybody in the room that wishes to speak? I have one. That's the only one. Two. Hey, for folks that want to speak, if you wouldn't mind standing up to the left of the podium, or identify yourself by just staying seated and raise your hand. And then same thing online, if folks want to use the raise hand function. So we have Is there anybody that's still seating that wants to speak? So I see 4 people standing. Is that correct? We're all on the same page there? All right, now I'm just gonna do a countdown. For folks who use the raise hand function via Zoom. We're gonna count down to 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have 1 hand up on mic, so we're going to start in the room.
Okay, Jean Rash, Monterey Vista. Jamie, that was fabulous. Fabulous presentation. Thank you so much. And I'm sure you're trying up there, okay? I don't understand why you're going to public comments again and NCIP has not been heard from. Makes no sense.
I'll keep it really brief and say thank you for opening this up because I really think that these voices need to be heard. And in addition to some of the great collaborative opportunities that I think you're going to get from these committee members, I'd also like to point out something that the city manager said that I absolutely agree with in the presentation, which is that the city has a spending problem. And I acknowledge we have many vital services, but I think in tandem with looking for sources of where we can shore up the budget issue, there should also be a conversation about where do we need to consider what things are perhaps optional that we can maybe revisit at a later time. That's a necessary part of the conversation too, so that the city is living within its means.
Great job, Jamie. I think the city does have a spending problem, but also the city has a collaboration problem at times. Working with the NCIP is not just giving a blank check request for amount. It's saying what the project is, what the detail is, what it's going to cover. I know we're not designing it as the NCIP, but we take the fiduciary responsibility of figuring out how to spend it. It doesn't make sense very seriously. And too often we've been given the blank, huge projects without any detail and said, trust us, we know what we're doing. You need to trust this commission too. They know what they're doing as well. And they're your eyes and ears and allow you to know that things have been vetted completely prior hand. And it's not just anything just being given and being done willy-nilly. There's a lot more critical thought put into these projects and things than I've ever seen at any project actually at past city council. So thank you, NCIP.
My name is Howard Fossler. I live here. I want to remind the city that it gets more top money than any other city in the county. If it can't live on that, I think it needs to be looked at. The other thing is that all this is a diversion of a little bit of money so the people here can have a say about what happens, how that money is spent. That's the only difference. If you're saying that you want to take that away, what you're doing is saying that you're not going to be paying attention to what we've been doing with that money all these years. It's important that we have a say in this little tiny slice of what the city's business is. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll take the one from the comment.
All right, Esther, it's you've been unmuted. You could unmute yourself. There's a mute button. You should be able to.
Okay, got me? Am I there now?
Yeah, you're there now.
Okay, so thanks for letting Jamie do that presentation. It was concise and it was worth having presented. I'm curious to hear reactions to that presentation and how, if the council or staff will rebut some of the points she brought up, because it seemed very simple. And I also want to point out that this isn't just a spending problem when it comes to what staff comes to and asks for. I have witnessed staff pull projects before they even got talked about on NCIP that were important to the people who submitted them and to those of us that were watching the meeting with no explanation. So I think there's a significant problem with the way staff has done things, which is created a lot of this sentiment that has to be addressed for this to successfully proceed forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Esther. And that concludes.
Awesome. Thank you for that diversion. I apologize for my confusion on that. So with that, let's go to Scott and we'll work our way around and we'll come back around here. Scott Hansen, sorry. I forgot. Jamie is actually bookmarked, booked up here by Bill Scott.
Am I
so-
supposed to make a comment or a question?
It's your floor to share whatever.
The one thought I have is, which could alleviate some of the friction or perceived friction is, as Gene said, if there would be a way for the city to insert into the process when there's a need, so the committee can know about it ahead of time, because unfortunate surprises are the worst kind. That's it.
What we'll do is we'll go around to everybody and then maybe staff can, and I'll try to take notes too on some of the questions that might come up, so that way we can answer those all at one time.
So even if NCIP didn't exist, the city has a problem. If all that money comes back into the city, you still have a problem from Andreas. The council needs to figure out how you're gonna fix it. Don't kick the can, as everybody keeps saying. It's not the NCIP, you need the other funding. And you need to figure out where you're gonna get that somehow. Those projects are not gonna go away. And Andrea, thank you for the presentation. And it's right, if staff would come and work with us, or even come to the neighborhood presidents and talk to the neighborhood presidents, who then would talk to us, things would get done. And Hans, I'm sorry, you raised my hackle so much. I've calmed down, but you get more with honey than you do with vinegar.
So what was that last line?
I said, you get more with honey than you do with vinegar.
Yeah.
That's just, so, thanks.
So there's a number of things that I have on my mind. Anyone can submit a project as long as they do it by the deadline. So Mr. Mayor, if you had one, Mr. City Manager, if you had one, anyone can submit a project. As previous person said, follow the process. We're following a process. We spend hundreds of our volunteer hours for free listening to public testimony, having 2 sets of public testimony, having 2 sets of review, having several meetings, looking at the projects, understanding them, working with the public, et cetera, et cetera. There's literally thousands of staff hours that we give to the city in service of the city. Where's our heart at? It's not an animosity. It's how do we get the best thing for our city? Because we're both in it together. And that's where we're coming from. We're serious about what we do. We may give staff grief sometimes, but I think we've always been very considerate of staff. I think we had a past member who was a little bit tough on staff, or tougher than the current members are. And I think that was addressed by a change that was made by the previous mayor, who said that the mayor gets to approve who gets nominated by onto the NCIP, which is one of the places where that came from. So I think we also have a lot of knowledge. When the money was pulled back for the emergency, it could be that we knew things about our projects that we could have told council about if we were asked. Like that project that was mentioned where there was drainage problem, and it's now not going to be funded, not going to be taken care of, and ultimately may result in loss of houses. We had a plan for that, but we weren't asked. And we are your arm and ears to try and help the city. And that's how we take our jobs as NCIP people. So we should be together.
Hi, Lee Whitney from Glenwood. Thank you for listening to my suggestion and coming to the kitchen table. The dishes still need to be done. I'd like to give a shout out to Reggie for the excellent job that he's been doing. And hopefully we'll continue doing. We've got to clone you, I think. There were years when we didn't have an engineer, or if there was and it was a full staff,
or if we had one, someone said, NCIP, forget, go over here, work on the city projects, come over here, do that, we'll get them later. That's what didn't help to give us a lot of old projects. Like Pat was saying, there's like projects on the books for like 10, 15 years. Last year, this year rather, whatever year. NCIP decided as a committee, those projects are dead, they're gone. We returned the library book, we checked out a new book. We can't cry over the spilled milk kind of stuff. They're history. If they feel valuable to be done, they need to be resubmitted. Some of those people that made this, put them in originally aren't even around anymore. And the situations or places of, and the things of the projects have changed if it's been that time period. And obviously we all know the prices have. So I'm saying, let's not bring up that old dirt. Let's just leave it go. Let's start afresh and let's move forward where it can be productive for the city and NCIP and the citizens and make it one of the best cities on the peninsula. We gotta get our act together, guys, financially. Whether it's whatever, who's ever spending and who's not spending, or we need to come together to do this on a positive note. Enough mud has been slung. Let's get out the lollipops and make it happy again, and let's work on this thing together. And if we need another kitchen table, we can do it. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gary Baker, and I have the pleasure of this being my first meeting. So it's been very entertaining. I must say, so thank you. Welcome to the scope. Yeah, thank you. I have a long history here in the community as well, and I know how important the NCIP is, and I'm happy to be here where I am, and I know I have a lot of catching up to do, and I've been trying my best to get caught up. Tyler and I are making efforts to get involved and meet with the neighbors, and so I can introduce myself and get to know people more on a one-on-one basis. I am open and flexible to new ideas and innovative solutions and having the discussion. And I agree with Tyler, I'm all about finding a space to be productive and where everyone can work together. And I know it's easier said than done, but I'm new and excited. So I'm here to help as much as I can. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Annie Jennings. I'm the alternate for Villa Del Monte. I've been on NCIP for 3 years now as an alternate. I've learned a lot. To be perfectly honest, it's probably not going to work. But if we'd had this meeting before all of the decisions on NCIP had been made, if we knew what the city needed before, we could have gone forward. But it was like we had made all these decisions, had all this time spent, and then all of a sudden we're here, and our part has already been done now. It would have been good to have this before all of that had taken place, because I feel like we're just spinning our wheels right now. And a lot of the NCIP, I know we have one more meeting and we have all these new people, but we're talking about the things that we approved this year. And what the finances are. And I loved your pie chart. That said a lot. We're this little big. If the city cannot manage itself on $200 million, come see me. I've managed my budget for 65 years and I'm doing good. I mean, I'm at least living here in Monterey. So if you need some help, let me know. But $200 million, and we're talking about a little sliver that is NCIP, that is such a good program. I mean, I have learned so much and been involved with my neighborhood, have things done, and it's been wonderful. And I think every city in the United States should have this kind of a program, because the citizens that make up the city need to have a say. And you can't always go to city council meetings, but maybe you can make it to a neighborhood meeting and let them know what your worries are or wants or needs. Anyway, I'm done. I'll get off my soapbox.
So I'm Shanaria Bona, I'm the new Monterey, NCIP rep. And I went to one of the meetings and I made a public comment and I said that the city has a communication problem. And I believe that was exemplified by kind of how the meeting started today. It didn't feel like the collaborative meeting. It kind of felt like we were being talked down to and scolded. So I'm very happy to see things kind of turn around, to have the opportunity for people to talk and to listen to each other. The public comments have been really great. And thank you for having this meeting in the first place. I think in terms of that communication piece, we had our first meeting in January and nothing was said about the city needing money for the fire stations or anything else. We go to the city council meeting and then all of a sudden there's a staff recommendation to basically bypass the NCIP and tell the council to tell NCIP what to do. And that made no sense to me because we literally just had a meeting where the city could have brought that up and it wasn't brought up, and instead it was communicated in a different way, which I think created a lot of the tension that we, all of us have been feeling overall as it relates to this topic. The other thing I brought up was, and I asked Reggie, are city projects supposed to be treated differently than other projects submitted by residents? Is there a hierarchy? Is there supposed to be a hierarchy? And the answer I got back was no, all projects are treated exactly the same. And I think that's how it should be. And I kind of feel like the messaging that I've been receiving over the last 7 months is that city projects should just be passed through without any questions. And that really bothers me, the idea of not being able to ask questions, especially when we are a committee that is responsible for giving recommendations to the council on how we feel the NCIP funds should be spent. I've said to the mayor, I spoke with you individually, and I said, I'm a physician, and I tell my patients, if you have a question and your doctor's response is to be defensive and angry, get a new doctor, because that's not appropriate. I want my patients to feel comfortable making decisions. I want them to ask questions. I want them to have all of the information so that they're making an informed decision. So the idea of just passing things through, not being able to ask questions, it shouldn't be perceived as an insult when we're asking questions. We really just want to understand what the ask is and how we can help deliver that ask. And then I think, that was basically the points that I wanted to make. Thank you.
We talk about the NCIP, but NCIP or NIP, when I first started working with this, it starts in the neighborhood. In a meeting in the neighborhood, and where they elect a president, secretary, and all that. And then we elect an NIP representative that's going to represent the neighborhoods to the city. And then we explain about the projects. And we take each project. It's not that they are just inventing projects. Our neighborhood didn't even have sidewalks or lights when I first started, and we got them now, and parking and all that. So the representative takes it to, first of all, they investigate if everyone is in agreement. They investigate if everyone has a problem. So that comes in the neighborhood, the people, okay? And then we bring that to the NCIP in a documented requisition. And all of them, take each project and examine it for 2-3 weeks or more. We stay in those meetings until midnight in the past. Okay, examine that and narrow it down. And then we go through the voting. And in the meantime, we go every month to our neighborhood and we report on that as the representative and tell them what it's all about. The people are very happy because, wow, we are doing something for our neighborhood and the city is listening. In the last few months, I don't know what to tell them because I have a very uneasy feeling. And listening today to what you guys said, and I got the impression that the city was thinking that by adopting NCIP fund, they will solve the problems. And the problems are, like many people have said, a mismanaged budget. That it happens in every household, in every city, and every country. They need to have it very carefully, okay? Because you cannot just go, I'm going to repair this or rebuild it. No, you don't do that at home. You have to plan it ahead. Otherwise, it becomes an emergency after an emergency and turns out to be more expensive. So if you have this program, I think it needs to be understood and valued, the cooperation, their work and all that. And then the city needs to really look careful about their budget. That's all.
Good job. Obviously, we have a communication problem between the council and NCIP. And I have to say, in years past, when I served as the alternate, we had one council member who regularly attended all of our meetings and was part of the process. And we sort of got a feel for what the priorities were for the city and as compared to the neighborhoods or in collaboration. It would be nice if we had a liaison member who would attend our meetings and there could be some sort of dialogue so we don't come to, this kind of, and that we've seen tonight. Just a thought, and that's all.
I'm AJ Brady, representative of the Hosts. Just finished up my first year serving on this committee, and it's been nice to get to be familiar with this process. I think some of the comments that some of the other committee members shared recently regarding communication is something that I've noticed here last year myself. Some of the notes I was just taking kind of during this discussion leading up to right now is really, it seems like there's an opportunity to really just get on the same page as it relates to things in regard to the budget, but then also what the city managers, the people that work for the city, the council kind of perceives as like maintenance and kind of like the role of NCIP as it relates to continuing to reinvest in the city itself. I will say, I do think it's not pointing fingers, I just want to share a comment that, I do think it's short-sighted to say that there's not opportunities to still fund projects in our neighborhoods. I don't know if I perceived that earlier comment differently than what it was meant to be shared as, but I think the beauty in NCIP or NIP is the fact that the barrier to propose a project is so low. Everyone in this room can propose a project. That is not the case having lived in much larger cities myself in the past, or just the perception that you're able to do so. And I think hearing from the community, from a method like this is an awesome way to kind of hear the needs of the community as they're distributed geographically across the city. Even though Monterey is pretty small, by miles, the way that the city is constructed, it's not necessarily as connected as many cities elsewhere. And so I think there are unique, perspectives depending on all the neighborhoods that are represented here that it's been great to learn about the importance of the priorities of all people in this community and their neighborhoods that they represent. I'm really hopeful from this meeting here today that we can find that common ground, and I think it's awesome that we're meeting here, the Hilltop Center, because this is where a new Monterey project was proposed and a city project was proposed, and so I'm hoping that the alignment of that common goal can be shared and we can find that path forward.
Amy Stover, I'm representative for the Alton Exit neighborhood. It's also my first meeting and I know there's some tensions in the room, but I just appreciate that everyone on each side has been very welcome. And I really appreciate that and I'm excited about being part of the intent represented by this meeting, the intent to resolve some of the issues. So I really appreciate that. I obviously being new, I don't have a lot of insight into the past, but and have some very big shoes to fill. Recognize already service predecessor. But on one of Jamie's slides, and hopefully I'll get it right, but I think the thing that really struck me and that I want to keep in mind as we go forward is that about the NCIP is not material to the larger city budget, but it's really material to the citizens of Monterey. So that really struck me about, and the students really resonated with me about forward and all dollars are significant and when you're trying to do a budget, you're doing your best to make these matches. It's challenging, but in keeping on with my money. Thank you for the welcome.
Hi, I'm Shelley Schmidt. This is also my first meeting. I just finished a stint on the architectural review committee. Enjoyed that a lot, but I wanted to do more for my community, my immediate neighborhood. I'm a retired deputy sheriff, and I was never able to do that while working as a deputy sheriff because my hours were so unpredictable. So as soon as I retired, I applied. My husband, who's here, he started the community involvement by applying for the Parks Commission, which he is on. However, I wanted to do more. So I think my previous employment as a deputy sheriff has prepared me for the attention. I'm a thick fish because of that. I think if I can handle
I feel your pain.
I don't know what to say. A few thousand inmates and angry people at court, I think I can do this job. I think just from listening to some of the meetings I've been studying, and there is definitely, and to echo what other members have said, there's definitely a communication issue, which I hope this meeting is step one towards resolving that. And I think someone mentioned a reset. I think it was someone in the audience, and I think this is a good reset point. I think you've heard frustrations we've heard from all sides, and hopefully that's a step towards being somewhere. I also have a certificate in mediation, so I'm hoping that will help. But I think the end goal that we all have, members of the NCIP, city staff, city council, the neighbors, we all want to make our city as best as we can. And so I think that's the purpose of NCIP. I think everyone involved is trying to get to that, but I think there's a solution somewhere in the middle. And I think compromise is going to be needed to be done just from what little I've heard from both sides. And I'm looking forward to this. I'm really excited. My alternate is here. We're also planning a meeting to introduce ourselves and hopefully start getting some in-person meetings where members can come, not just our neighborhood association people. I really don't know how many of our residents are in our association. So my goal is to not just get association, but also residents who are not in our association involved. And to continue to do the good work that my predecessor, Mr. Rosello, started long ago and continued up until recently. So that's the goal, and I'm just happy to be here.
Good job.
We'll talk over the other stuff.
Yes, I get the pleasure of going last. And really a lot of what I want to say, I will, has already been said. But for me, I wanted to join this committee, because of how unique it is that it allows every citizen to provide a voice. Less than 2 months ago, I finished 27 years in the Navy, and I've never been able to have a voice, so for me, until you get to, the level then you are the voice, and part of me wants just to, hearing what's going on here in some of the past, just want to, put my hat back on and fix things, but, that's not my role. I really embrace the idea of the reset button. There is not a communication problem. There was a communication problem. There are not sides, there are parties. There are groups, we need to, I don't want to be grouped into any other past, people, on either side. I'm excited for this opportunity. But I also want to say on the budget side is, I don't know, I'm looking forward to learning more about the budget and helping how I can. But if the city of Monterey is a ship and NCIP's 5% or less is the life preserver, then there's a greater problem to be addressed. And I look forward to being part of the problem, or part of the solution.
With the thing.
I had it, yeah.
Scott, sometimes you're interchangeable. Hey, Scott, congratulations on retirement.
No, thank you.
Okay, so I captured some questions. Some of them were what I came up with throughout the discussion, but also what I captured here. So I'm going to pass those to staff real quick. I'm going to kind of run through them, and then if you can, I'm sure you captured some yourself, but let me just try to throw it through, and then that way you can add to it if it's helpful. So I think a big question that I heard, a big theme was the process, like when does staff propose projects? There was the whole thing that happened this year with coming to the council before, and as was indicated, there was a meeting with before NCIP versus submitting a project. I know, Hans, when you were presenting, you were saying you've heard from NCIP members that we shouldn't be submitting projects. So I think that whole question around just process and being clear around what that is. So I'm interested in staff's perspective on that. And then there's this other question, I think, theme that I heard around, will the NCIP fund solve the problem? And there's a big question that resides there. And then drilling down on the budget piece is, I think, how do you distinguish between staff's proposal of currently what it looks like as the 2% into the general fund from NCIP versus what we heard in public comments from James' presentation in regards to how NCIP has already been approving projects that are for maintenance purposes.
Yeah, thank you so much for the questions, and let's start with the one theme that Kurt called unfortunate surprises. And I have set the reset button, so take it in that spirit, right?
Right.
There were no unfortunate surprises. When the projects were presented in February, the projects that the city submitted were submitted prior to the deadline of the NCIP submittal. And then we submitted the projects together with all the other NCIP projects. So, and again, help me better understand maybe afterwards what unfortunate surprises, but we stuck to the process. The city council always hears the projects that the NCIP has in their draft plans. That goes to generic. That was done on April 4th, and it was announced in December or January to the NCIP that we will go to the city council and present those projects. And again, as I stated earlier, the NCIP encourages to hear from staff what they think are important projects. So that's what we did on April 2nd. It's part of the regular scheduled NCIP schedule. So again, nothing was sprung, there was no surprise. Yes, we were very clear to the council what we as staff want to do for our firefighters and for all community members who live and enjoy the Hilltop Park Center or live in New Monterey or in any other part of the city. So again, I just wanted to clarify that because we followed the process. And again, if there was something that we didn't follow, please help me understand that. But we started to the schedule as it was published early on. The budget is.
I'm sorry, maybe, let me try, because I'm trying to pick up on some of the things that I heard, so I kind of want to play with you here on this one a little bit. I guess part of what I'm hearing is that folks are concerned around staff circumventing the NCIP and coming to the council, and proposing to the council to get the council's blessing before the NCIP had even a chance to propose it.
Mr. Mayor, that's what I just explained. We follow that process to the T. It is part of the NCIP schedule that the council gets to hear all the projects. And at that part also, we as the staff are encouraged to speak about our projects as well. That's what we do. Okay. And again, I don't think that was unfortunate or that was not done correctly. And when we highlighted to the council that projects from staff were proposed that included the fire stations in Hilltop. And that was a scheduled meeting that was that is part of annual council work. You see every year the NCIP project. Every single year you're seeing them in this draft form before it's voting night, before the projects get more fine-tuned and get ready for voting.
I think it was just the idea, and I'm not saying what right is, I'm just saying, I'm trying to translate what I'm hearing is, and I know that prior years when I've been on the council, staff hasn't traditionally submitted projects forward for council approval to then pass it to the NCIP for consideration. And so I think that's kind of part of what I'm hearing in regards to where there might be a desire to shift that. So I'm maybe missing something there.
Yeah. Maybe I can make a comment on this team, please. Yeah. And I think it's central to what I hear tonight, and I've heard it before, is that timing may have worked in the past and it didn't sound like it worked so well this time, because I think some members that were there saw that presentation because they were in the middle of their NCIP process. They had already started. I think that the opportunity is to us look at that timeline and also share that with the NCIP, that this is what's going to be presented to the council, and we need to figure out, should that be in February? Is it possible for us to do that early? And I know we're formulating our budget in a tight timeline, but it seems like that's really central to the communications issue that we want to get from. Like, we want takeaways tonight about how we can work the timelines, the communications, and maybe more written material directly to the NCIP through their chair, that this is what the council can hear at whatever that new date may be. And so that they factor that in their process and they internalize that in their system, so that the next time it comes around, we're not doing the same thing again. So we're kind of looking at a new timeline.
Well, and I think we understand now. I think maybe there could be a more dialogue with the NCIP and council, and we can figure out what that exactly looks like. So I think we're onto something there. Oh, go ahead, Fred.
In line with this communication, that's one of the things I have on there, is that I feel that we need to meet with NCIP annually, maybe February of each year, or I don't know the exact timetable that will work, but just listening to some of the process, maybe February of each year. So that way, it's happening annually. So you don't have to ask for it. You don't have to wait for it, all this. You can already know we're going to have that conversation And in the process, early enough where we can be able to make sure everything's clear and that everything is respecting the process.
Let me let Hans finish, and let's allow each other to go and engage in a conversation.
Let me touch on the budget as well, because I think that would be helpful to understand where we are with the budget. I'll ask Matt to go a little bit more into it, but there are two large scale elements of the budget. There's the general fund budget, which is about $113 million. And then there are the funds for the different enterprise funds that we have, the special funds, sewer fund, storm drain fund, Tidelands fund, parking fund, etc. We've over 40 different funds. They make up the other $100 million that are part of that. Those other special funds are funds in a way we cannot dedicate to certain things. We cannot use the sewer fund to fix Hilltop Parkside, right? Everyone understands that. So if the only other element that I want to add before I let Ned talk a little bit more about it is 70 to 74% of the city funds go towards the employees that are working in the city. So that sounds like a scary big number, and it blows many people's socks off. But that's what is necessary to have a police force, to have a fire force, to have public works out there, parks and recreation, etc., etc. So a great chunk of the funding goes towards salaries. And again, we are not in the highest group of folks. We are usually in the lower 1/3 if you compare us with other cities. And so it shrinks this discretionary funding. So the pie chart looks really good, but when you put actually in what is discretionary, what is non-discretionary, the pie chart is a little bit different. So for that, I give it to that.
Thank you, Hans. I think Hans explained it quite well, and I'll try not to take too long in explaining some of the challenges that we have and where the capital projects fit in with the budget. You know, each year, twice a year, I deliver a presentation, usually 2 to 3 hours to military students in their MPA class about budgeting. I'm going to try to do that in about 5 minutes. Okay, so the idea that that out of the general fund's budget, we have 113 million, as Hans said, in general fund, and about $100 million in what we call special funds. Those special funds are dedicated for a special purpose, and so there is no flexibility in terms of that. So the idea that the NCIP portion of the city's budget is a drop in the bucket, I would agree, it's very important to the community and to the neighbors, but I would also agree that it's also material to the city, just as it is material to residents and to the neighbors as well. Of some of the examples of the special funds that we have include Measure P and S. Those are dedicated to specific projects for, as voters approved, right? For streets and roads and storm drains, just as an example, sidewalks. Within the general fund itself, and let's just look at the $113 million. Most of that money is already accounted for. And one of the reasons, and this is how city budgets work in general, it's accounted for because of if we still want to provide the services that we provide, which include police and fire and libraries and recreation and all the staffing. And as Hans said, 70 to 74% of any city's budget typically is personnel, is because the personnel are the ones who deliver services to the community. They're the firefighters who are out there. There are police officers, there are recreation professionals, parks workers who help maintain the parks in our neighborhoods. That money is already committed if our intent is to maintain the same level of service each year. And as we all know, with inflation and with additional costs that we all have in our own personal budgets, whether it's gasoline or other expenses, energy, those costs continue to increase, not only on the personnel side, but also on other operational needs. Yeah, when we were looking at the budget for just 20 years ago for a ladder truck. Back, just 20 years ago, it was $300,000 for a ladder truck. Now it's how many million dollars? $1.6 million for one ladder truck. And we have on call at every single day here in the city of Monterey, firefighters, not only here in New Monterey, we've got 3 on staff now. They run 3 shifts, so 9 full-time firefighters dedicated just to the New Monterey neighborhood primarily. Of course, they go outside as needed. We have a total of 18 firefighters at the central fire station, paid 100% by city funds. And then 9 in the Villa Del Monte neighborhood serving that part of the community. So this is kind of a long way of saying there are expenses that the city has, and they're already accounted for. They're what we would call non-discretionary funds. Unless the city wants to decide, and unless our community all agrees that, we'd rather put funds towards repairing Hilltop Park Center or one of the park centers, and instead let's close the fire station, that's certainly an option. But how popular is that, as Hans mentioned? If you have a great example. How many of you would like to see a fire station closed so that we can maintain roads and streets? We don't want to see that. I don't think our community does. So the bottom line of this is those funds are already allocated, and I know, our staff and the community together through budget sessions, we've had quite a few this last few months, gathering feedback from the community on what are your priorities, what would you like to see? Every dollar, frankly, has a purpose, right? And every dollar is accounted for. So this is the challenge that we have. We try to maintain services, we try not to cut services, and then at the end of the day, what very little is left is for CIP, which we have very limited dollars of. And that's why I know there's a perception, but that's why we look to NCIP in terms of being part of the solution, looking at what other community priorities do we want to fund? What other facilities do we want to fund? Because the funds aren't going to come elsewhere unless we're all willing to increase taxes in different ways, which we know is unpopular as well. So this is part of the budget challenge I think that we have as a city, and wanted to add that perspective to the table, to the conversations we're having together as a group, because we're all on the same team at the end of the day here.
Yeah, Amir, can we sit down with some of the?
Absolutely. Give me 1 second. Hans, were you all set? Because I think there was another question embedded.
The question was about the 2% for maintenance, and so again, one of the things that everyone has been around NCIP and public works for many years knows that whenever we have projects that come forward that are part of the NCIP, for many years now, we are pointing out this will cost an additional X amount in ongoing operation and maintenance. We started doing this probably from 2008, 2009, when we wanted to highlight also that certain things cost money. And I guess that is the operation and maintenance changing. Yes, there are projects that fix the lockers or replace the lockers or do other great maintenance, quote unquote maintenance things. But the ongoing maintenance is one of them. I put the public works director on the spot here right now by asking, how many of the NCIP funded speed signs do we have? 23, or what was the number?
I want to say original.
I think the NCIP funded wonderful speed signs in the neighborhood to check what is the speed. The homeless discovered that the solar attached to those speed signs are really cool to fire up their electric gear that they use wherever they live.
That's right.
Because all what I wanted to say is, and
Why don't you finish wrapping up your point, and then we'll close them out.
Absolutely. Where's the money coming from to replace those solar panels? They come from the ongoing operation and maintenance. That's just one small example.
Okay, I saw a few hands up, so we'll get to those and then we'll let the council jump in. So I think Dennis had his hand up.
I think I saw a good presentation by the Director of Public Works about what projects are gonna need maintenance, which could certainly be timely for the February submissions for NCIP outside of the city budget cycle, because you guys are working on the bigger things. The maintenance things that we might be able to handle could be presented that way, because we have funded those in the past. And if, when we know what they're about, we certainly support them. And when they're just a general pool, it's not as easy to support. Because as I said before, we're trying to look out for the best for our city overall. We're devoted citizens trying to help.
No, it's, I don't know, it's kind of a similar sentiment, but I feel that, you know, really not, you're presenting the budget, it makes sense, but that, you know, there is this set of special funds, and I have room to understand that, you know, how that fits into the movements and the infrastructure and the ongoing kind of needs of the city itself. It seems that there are a set of, you know, needs within the city that fall outside of those special projects, but understanding which of those are in the form of projects would be helpful, just as we do pursue this committee. So,
Yeah. Were there any, Tim?
Well, with the fact that you were saying that, 55% of the NCIP money goes to maintenance, and that's, you know, what's it called? I can't even think of it. Where they clear the area so it doesn't fire. Fuel reduction, thank you. And things like that, that are maintenance that we do approve of. And we just need to know what's going on, before we make our decisions. But even if you weren't even involved, and I'm sorry, in the last 3 years, I think that the way that I had it in my mind is we get the projects. The city council wasn't basically involved until August when we decided what we want to put before the city council for approval. This year, we just started, and then, no, we have to 2 million for this and 2 million for that the staff and the city council has requested. If those were projects that you submitted at the right time, we would have discussed it and said, okay, Hilltop Park definitely needs help. We need to do that. We definitely need to help our firefighters. We did that. We didn't need any help from anybody else. We were smart enough to figure that out on our own. And so 55% of our money is going to maintenance or to help the city. I don't see a problem. That's half of our money. And then there's little projects that need to be done, like tot lots or whatever for the neighborhoods. But if we're giving half of our money already for maintenance, I'm not quite sure what the city wants us to do or the staff wants us to do. Because it's not like we've got $15 million just sitting there waiting for you guys to come and say, we don't have enough money, and then take it away.
All right, I'm gonna do one more so that the council can jump in here and start changing.
Yeah, it's, so I think you can see, the NCIP has an amazing amount of energy. So I'm gonna slip this in now, because I don't know where we're going, but we can stay here all night. And so far, they've been letting you off easy. The discussions are usually in much more detail than this. But what I've heard so far is that clarification of the city's position on projects, particularly when they're really big, would help the committee to do better. The committee and how it interacts with staff, we're certainly looking at that, and we'll see what we can do to figure out how we can make communications better. City council liaison, yeah, we used to have liaisons up and liaisons back. So those are just 1, 2, 3 little tiny things that would be able to, I think, let us move forward as an NCIP committee that's doing a good job with the city and the city's resources in a way that will add value to the city like it always has. We're spending a lot. When we hear about broken signs, we put them in. The beach boardwalk of the neighborhood, my neighborhood is listed as a maintenance problem. Did you know the city didn't put that in? NCIP funds maintenance on it every single year. It's not causing maintenance, it's doing maintenance. So we continue to have a discussion. It was put in by developers back in '96. So I think we can't solve those problems tonight. It's getting late.
I think that we should work together in that and have communication going back and forth. And then if we want to have another meeting, we can. But we've had communication before and it just hasn't been happening in this last cycle.
I just need to clarify, the NCIP charter prohibits maintenance, money to be spent on maintenance. So you're talking maintenance, we talk maintenance. What you call maintenance is investment into rehabilitation, fixing, building new things. When we talk about the 2% maintenance, we're talking about the charter prohibits that you cannot allocate funding from the NCIP per charter to have us go out and fix something as ongoing maintenance. You can fund pickleball courts.
I know.
But you cannot fund the ongoing maintenance there with respect to litter control, sweeping, replacement of nets, driving, etc. That's by charter prohibited. So we have to talk about semantics then as well. What is maintenance and what is maintenance?
Okay, Alan, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Thank you. So, first of all, thank you to everyone who has served and is serving. Really appreciate you. Lots of great comments. So first of all, with respect to the budget, I think one thing that would really help is if we differentiate infrastructure needs that have funding sources. So for example, you mentioned sewers, we have sewer rates, and if we're not charging enough to plan for long-term infrastructure, that's on the council and staff in terms of setting sewer rates. We gotta look at all of those funds. So the wharf, we've got the Tidelands Fund. The marina, we have a marina fund. The parking lots, we got a parking fund, and for the garages. Storm drains and roads, and sidewalks, we've been funding through measures P and S. So I do think just in terms of kind of how we present it, we've got to separate out those infrastructure needs that have funding sources. And if it's not enough, then you've got to come back to us and tell us, and we've got to work with those funds. A lot of good suggestions. I think one thing that would really help is if council working with NCIP develop some criteria and guidelines. So, for example, in my mind, public safety would be a #1 criteria. I've got a whole list somewhere here. It's probably not the time for me to go through them all. And I think we need to develop those collaboratively. But I think we need to have a collaboratively determined kind of set of criteria that you then use. And then when it comes to us, hopefully we're probably going to be more aligned. 2, as far as the liaison, I think it's a great idea. We need to ask our city attorney if it's permitted. I personally don't go to your meetings or even other meetings just because I don't want to influence you since I'm an ultimate decision maker. But if we send somebody, if we designate somebody, maybe that's okay. But I think we need to figure out whether it's a liaison, or I think it might have been Amy or someone else, maybe whether it's meeting once a year, kind of at a certain point that makes sense, just like this, but then we'd be more focused on specific things. That might be good. Let's see, Pat Benza talked about looking at the number of projects that can kind of reasonably be done. I think that might make sense because we've gotten into problems in the past where we've just had so many projects and we don't complete them. So I think that's something where NCIP needs to collaborate with staff to figure out, what is that magic? What is sort of a reasonable number of projects? And then they can work within that and the projects that are proposed. I do agree that we, that is city council and staff, need to make our proposals in a timely manner. And if the existing process and timeline doesn't work for staff, then we need to work with the committee to figure out, well, what does work. But I do think we should work through the committee. I do believe we can get a lot of our citywide needs done by working with the committee, and the committee has historically been very supportive. So I think it's a question of communication and timing on making sure we're proposing our citywide needs in a timely way. And then, the last thing, I think it might have been Shaneri who said this. I just want to emphasize that I really appreciate that and agree with it, that all projects need to be treated equally. But then I think that circles back to having a kind of community agreed upon set of ranking criteria. So it's not politics at the committee level or politics on the council level or politics coming from this, but we have criteria. That's my comments. Thank you. Who wants to go next?
So I'll also start with thanking everyone for your commitment, for being here tonight, and all the comments and ideas that you shared. The way that I'm interpreting what I've heard tonight is the following. I hear a lot about projects, what projects we need to focus on or shouldn't focus on. I hear about budgets. I would actually propose that we take not one step back, but maybe a couple steps back and really identify a better structure for us to all work within, so that we are a little bit more collaborative. Because this is, I appreciate all the ideas that are being shared, but what I'm also hearing is that everybody's coming in with different ideas based on their experiences, their different contexts, right? Which is great, but we need to figure out a better way to align ourselves so that communication, I think, is aligned a little bit better. And it makes me think about the hierarchy, or not the hierarchy, but the diagram that we saw in the presentation earlier. Kind of feels like there should be maybe one or two more bubbles in there that include either city staff or council, so that there's more communication also coming from this side towards NCIP. It just, for me, in the years that I've been somewhat familiar with NCIP and now in the current role that I'm in, I still feel like there's a little bit too much separation between groups. And I mean, we're all really working on the same team, right? So we're working with the same bucket of funding. I mean, we're all in the same jurisdiction. So we need to talk a little bit better about how we're all trying to move projects forward with that bucket. So I just wanted also to highlight that I appreciate the history that was shared today about NCIP, because I think the folks who were involved in initially setting up NCIP were very forward thinking. I think this is a process that is very forward thinking. That's why you don't see it everywhere. I think it's a process that should be replicated. But then the question also comes back to me, why isn't it replicated? So who knows, right? I'll just leave it out there to simmer. But going back to the importance of it, it's really a forward-thinking process, because it really engages the real experts, right? The real folks who know what their community needs, right? And those experts are all of us as residents. So we have to figure out a way to protect it. And the way that we're going to do that, I believe, is by, again, looking at the structure again, hitting that reset button, really figuring out what it is that now in our current times we need to work better together. I'll share a little bit in terms of what my context is and how and why I interpret things this way. So, working in transportation planning, I worked heavily with communities outside of this jurisdiction in designing processes like this. And I know that community is very committed, and once there's a bucket of funding, don't take it away because it will be hurt, right? And I go back to that same point that I was just mentioning, that we're working with the same bucket. So we're working within the same jurisdiction. Let's all work together to make sure that that works smoothly. Let's see, what else did I want to add here? See if I can finish before it ends. So, one point that I also had actually started over here that, Councilmember Alpha shared was, about attending NCIP meetings. I personally have been very interested in attending not only NCIP meetings, but other meetings for other commissions and boards. But I also think about how that would potentially influence decisions, right? So I have it as a follow-up item to really dig into that and figure out if legally, right, there's a way that I could be more involved without breaking any rules and really doing it in a way that doesn't influence the activities of those boards and commissions. So I'll follow up on that. Thank you for raising the item about, and actually Jamie, you brought this up in your presentation, so thank you so much for raising the item about every resident gets a vote. I think that is critical. It's a critical component. What I will share is that in the 15, 20 years that I've lived in my neighborhood, I didn't have that communication. So I think that's, if we're talking about, you know, the real critical component of this process being a community-driven process, that's also something we need to look at, because the folks who are contributing to this process, if we're talking about every resident, it shouldn't just be every resident who pays their dues at their neighborhood association. It should be everyone, right, who is a resident of the city of Monterey. So I'll end with that. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you so much. I applaud all of you for all the hours that you've given in NCIP. It takes a lot, and it's very important. I echo my colleagues, and saying the same thing, that we're on the same team. We all want to make sure that our city is taken care of, maintained, beautified, safe, all those pieces. So I think at the end of the day, it's like what we were talking about before, it's communication. All I'm hearing really all night long, without hearing, I keep hearing is communication, right? Either miscommunication, not understanding, or not communicating at all, right? So I think communication is part of the issue. So that's why I feel, like I said already, about the annual meetings that we would already have in February. So that way it's in line with your process, would be very important to have. So therefore, there's not, NCIP trying to ask for a meeting, it's already a part of it, because then that helps with the communication on a regular. That doesn't take away from with the liaison and the rep from the city staff would already happen. And I do like the idea of, if it's legal, what they were talking about, the liaison being able to come to the meeting for us, so that it doesn't break any rules there. But I think at the end of the day, when you're looking at the projects, it does need some sort of criteria, and I think that makes sense of what's important, like my colleague Alan Apollo was talking about. So that that way, when you're looking at it, you're still looking at it the same way, and we're looking at it the same way, but then we know exactly if you have a safety issue, of course, that's gonna take precedent. With the war, something getting ready to, fall and somebody have an accident, of course, that's gonna take precedent. But I think that's gonna be important by having the annual meeting, that open the communication up and getting the understanding. So you're hearing about maintenance. I just heard even in the last, conversation, our city manager said, this is what we think of when we say maintenance. And then Dave said, this is what we say when we mean maintenance. That communication so that we're able to be on the same page of when we say maintenance, what does that look like? What does that mean? What does that include? So that I think part of that conversation will help make sure that we're on the same page. So I think at the end of the day, we all have to remember, we are on the same team and that we're making sure, just like, I like how we keep saying, coming to the kitchen table, just like with your family. When you have issues with your family, you gotta come to the kitchen table and make it work, and you have to have that intention to want to make it work. And I think at this table right now, the kitchen table, Ms. Whitney, we have that intention to wanna make it work. And so I really appreciate, everybody talking tonight and hearing from the public, but at the end of the day, we gotta make sure that our city is taken care of. And that means safety, happiness, and being able to live in a vibrant and beautiful city, which we do live in, but we have to maintain it, we have to keep it going, and even though we talk about the shiny things that we have and why we spend them with, just like Ms. Whitney was saying, we can't talk about that now, it's here. So now that it's here, where do we go from here, so that we don't kick it down the road, and down the road, and be able to see a number of projects. I like that too, because not knowing how many projects, I mean, I'm listening to 99 projects, and I'm listening to how many is actually being done, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't make sense if you're going around having a voice in the neighborhood and saying, yeah, I want this to be done, and you don't ever see it because you got 99 projects in front of you. I mean, how does that look, and how would that be rated? Like if you say we're gonna do 20 projects, like I believe Jenny was saying, for instance, if you're gonna do 20 projects a year as you collaborate with the city staff, but what does that look like and prioritizing? These are the 20 projects that we feel like they should prioritize and being able to be on the same page with that. And I think that's important so that we're able to be on the same page and be able to tell the residents that have a voice, okay, we got 20 projects we're doing per year, so they already know what to expect. So I'm gonna kind of end there and say thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for enduring this long meeting. I'll hurry up because Reveille is coming soon. What we heard at 10 o'clock is what I've been hearing my entire life because I was born in Pacific Grove and heard that my entire life. So it's a special time at 10 o'clock when you hear that. And I hope you all appreciate that. So here's some thoughts. And I'm going to just kind of go with the way I heard them. First off, I think tonight we allowed staff to start out and go, and you had to wait too long to speak. The next time we do this, we need to figure out a way that we have this mutual understanding that we say, okay, talk to us, tell us what we need to hear, and then we open it up, and we got there, and it was good that we got there. But I think it's fundamentally important that I know it's the Brown Act, and I know we got certain things we've got to do, but we've got to figure out a way that we can just say, hey, here's the topic, now let's talk about it. So that we're not having to wait an hour and a half or 2 hours or 3.5 for you to finally hear from a council member. Maybe you don't want to hear from me, but it's important that you be able to speak sooner. The other thing I want to say is that in grassroots, I think government is fearful of too much power and influence that sits with the voter. It's just fundamental. There's some inherent things that happen in government representation, but this is different here, and that's a good thing. I wish that it became the grassroots way in every city in America, because to me, we get the unvarnished needs and requests from the citizens without us having to go pull it out of you. You get together, you talk to your neighbors, and then we hear about it. And it's important that we keep that way. Because there's a lot of things that I believe that there's still options. I think there's lots of choices left over. And there's lots of things that we can continue to build this dialogue where we identify common language, common terms, understandings without changing the charter. Because fundamentally, I think we have a document. It's been updated. We know what the guidelines are. We know what the rules are. It's in the charter. And us having to say, no, we don't want to change the charter in that last council meeting and whatever date that was, started, like that started the emotions. And from what I know in some of my training is that emotion usually does not exist in the same room with logic and reasoning. And when that happens, you have a disagreement and an argument. Well, we don't want to have that relationship with you all. And we hope that you will give us a different kind of chance. And I think that chance is if we find some ways to enhance communications. I think that we need to work on what that's going to look like. We need to reset that and go forward. We need to work on our timelines for you all so that when we make our request from the city and you kind of know what's coming from the city, you shouldn't be surprised. And we should have it on our calendar sooner. And we should never drop bombs in the middle of your process when you're all studying all of your issues and you're getting prepared to represent your neighborhoods. When all of a sudden it looks like in the middle of emergency, there's a rule of thumb. Work emergency, don't create a new one. Well, we created a new one. So give us another chance. And I think that in April, it's too late. We talked about that, that's on the table. Let's recalibrate the right timelines. I'm very interested in knowing statutorily, how do we clean up the list? Tammy, I think you brought it up, some others brought it up. If we've got old dated lists, there's money set aside, but that project's never gonna get brought forward or no longer valid. That needs to be an ongoing process. And I don't know what the mechanics will be on the legal side of that, but I think to me, that's a high priority to figure out what needs to fall out of the old lists and spend more time on the current projects that we can get done. So we don't burn out our staff who's frustrated in only being able to do 10 or 11 projects when we've got 90 projects in the queue for years past. So I think from a staff perspective, that would be helpful. I yearn for the time when we can say, we're getting some of these really big projects that are very, very important that are being fulfilled, and you're seeing that actually happen. So you have representative government, so you can say, hey, our vote counted and the project is getting done. I think it's very important that we align your expectations with the vote that we've confirmed. We've said, yes, the money's budgeted, and we should never be in a position where we wait 5, 6, 7 years for that. We need to close the gap on that. And that may be a staffing reprioritization that we have to figure out how we get our staff in public works and our appointed engineer representative the help that they're going to need to move through projects faster. But I know that's been a problem for years. I want to just close and say thank you for the years past of the work, and thank you for those that are new that have said, yes, you would like to join this emotion and logic increased cycle. But you know, when you go through these crazy cycles, you can get to a point where you can say, we have mutual agreement, but we may not be approaching it in the same communications manner. That means we stick with it and we don't go crazy emotional and storm out. We come back at it and say, this relationship is worth working on because the outcome is greater than any other city in America because it's Monterey's way of doing it, and we don't want to change that. And we can refine a few of our processes. So I see this as an opportunity to refine some processes, not major departures, more frequent representation. And I don't know if that looks like a subcommittee of the council, or if we have a time period where the council meets with you all at a certain right time and the time. But whatever that can work out with, I think maybe we have the mayor and the chair get together and start talking about it and figure out how we do this. As long as we don't create any other timeline that creates a couple more bubbles and a couple more layers of government, which then adds to the dilemma of getting projects done faster. This is about speedy access to your government representations, so you can represent it so that you make sure that the communication gets to us. And I do watch on Zoom after the meetings. I have been in years past, and the times I've gone, as others have expressed. I don't want to intimidate you, and I don't want to tell you the way you should go. And I kind of disagree with the thought that we should have common priorities, that we identify a list and you identify a list. That sort of starts to feel like I'm setting my priorities that I expect you to follow. And I think that the way NCIP is designed is for us to not interfere. But there's a cross section where we figure out where we come together at the right time without us giving you the intimidation or the expectation that you should think this way. You should be free thinking with your own ideas and tell us what you need, and we'll come together as right prosperous to make the right decisions. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying up so late.
I gotta sleep in tomorrow.
I'll call you at 6.
Yeah, I just to pick up where you left off, with Councilmember Smith, I agree with the idea of maybe not the council kind of giving some directive out to the NCIP, because I think how I at least imagine the NCIP is that you all are the experts in your neighborhoods and you're kind of in the front lines more, so if you will. And so I trust you all to help facilitate that process with your neighbors. And I think that there is kind of already some level of a guideline, if you all felt you needed it, from the council's mission, vision, the value drivers. So I think there's something kind of already there that might help kind of to build that. And if the council feels like we need to update that, then I feel like that's an exercise that we could go into. I'm going to try to run through a couple of thoughts here. I think one of the most interesting things to me, and I appreciate Pat Benza, who's no longer here, for adding the thought comments in regards to how do we, the focus of how do we make people feel like the projects that are getting approved, submitted and approved, are going to actually come to fruition. My concern is that we add to, as opposed to creating space for bringing people into the fold, that people will get turned off and like, okay, well, I submitted a project 2 years in a row, it's got approved and it gets accomplished. So I really want to make sure that we find a way to address that. And I think Pat's proposal maybe gets that. I don't know if it's the perfect proposal, but I think it would be an interesting thing to leave up for discussion. I want to get to this point around the fact that a couple of folks brought this up around every resident has the chance to submit. I think that's the wonderful thing about NCIP, but I also want to cautious us to thinking that, and I think Gino was kind of getting to this a little bit, that means that everybody in the community also is aware of or has the capacity to submit a project. And I think that's kind of, when I sit in my role as mayor, I'm not thinking about just this program of NCIP, which is great. Nobody's knocking NCIP, at least on the council. Nobody's knocking NCIP, I think it's great. But we need to make sure that we're looking after every community member in the city of Monterey, that there's no way that we're gonna be able to capture them all. Let's try to find a way of bringing more people into the fold. But there's other things that are happening in the city that go beyond just the projects that are being proposed by staff or by community members that are engaged in that, are paying attention or have the capacity to submit a project. So I think that's just something for us to be mindful of, that we don't just kind of quickly jump to the conclusion that, well, because it's open to everybody, that automatically everybody is going to submit a project if they have an idea. I imagine that there's way more ideas out there that we're not capturing than we are. It's great that we have this vehicle, but let's not say that this is the end all be all. NCIP versus city projects, I think I'm gonna try not to go at length here because I think a lot of this is, let's have this as a follow-up discussion, but I think that there's a conversation to drill in a little bit more on between NCIP community projects versus city projects. I think we made a little bit of headspace there. It seems like we're generally in agreement around the city has the capacity or capability of submitting projects, but I think we need to work on that and in particular around the process and making sure that it's clear that we're all on the same page in regards to what that looks like for the city to submit something. If it goes in front of the council, like what does that whole process look like? Let's talk through that. Let's make sure it's abundantly clear so that it doesn't feel like a surprise to anybody. There are things that come in front of NCIP. I feel, this is just me, Tyler speaking, I don't want shots fired at me, right? I feel like we should be able to be open and honest with each other. So I'm trying to be open and honest, and I'm not saying that I'm trying to take something away from anybody, right? I'm just trying to reflect on how we manage this all. There are certain things that go in front of NCIP that I don't feel like should go in front of NCIP, right? So, but where's the funding gonna come from if we don't do those things? So I think that there is space for us to say, hey, can we take some of the funding from NCIP and just allow it to be a part of the regular city revenues? And then a big example that I think of is the fuel reduction. So let's just say for a chance, 1 year, we have a different makeup of the NCIP, and the NCIP decides that fuel reduction is not a priority. So you're gonna say we're not gonna fund fuel reduction? I mean, I think we can all agree as a community that that's pretty essential to city services within the city of Monterey. And let's say that we never have an NCIP that decides that, they always prioritize it. Well, why are we wasting NCIP's time in putting a project in front of you that you're gonna approve anyways? Like, how can we let you focus on those true community projects, right? Things that people are submitting and allow, like, I think allowing some fluidity in trying to adjust things, just like the NCIP did when it was founded, right? They originally came up with some funding allocations for different types of programs. They ditched that. There was some fluidity in that. I think that there's space for that, and I just offer that out there too. One of the thoughts that I have too is around potential litigation. I mean, there's this whole conversation around maintenance, and there's this idea that the city can propose maintenance projects to the NCIP, and the NCIP can consider them, and they can also choose not to consider them. But I think that there's something in particular that I inherently trust. I mean, I will question, and all of us have the ability to question as we do with a public agency, our staff's ability to be able to manage the various things that are going on in the city of Monterey. But again, for whatever reason, let's say the NCIP doesn't prioritize a certain project that staff says is a priority, when we might have crumbling infrastructure and it doesn't make the cut for whatever reason. Part of what I'm thinking about is some concern around liability. If there is some failures there, how do we make sure that we allow those things to rise to the top? The idea of the reserve funds, because there's this idea that we can just tap into it and use it for what we need today. But one of my hopes is that yes, we do. I think it's a balance, because how do we take care of the needs of today, but also think about tomorrow? And we're using these facilities as we go now. So I just want to make sure that we maintain some level of balance so that there is some cushion in those reserves for things that we really need. But we also kind of build it up to a place where we can do things as we go along. So I just wanted to share that. I think there needs to be a little bit of a balance there. Staff shared with me on the side, there's this whole conversation around having a rep, a liaison conversation. And I don't think any of us really were top of mind of it, but the city approves council appointed representatives to outside agencies and city committees. And there is a line item on there for NCIP committee And the mayor, yours truly, is, the rep, for that. So I.
Well.
Here I am. Here I am.
So that's also the problem, because that's what you were trying to tell me.
And so I very much, look forward to finding a way of being more collaborative, with the NCIP. I think it's a great idea to, sit and have deeper conversation with the chair. I don't know if, what a kind of deeper ongoing, I like the idea of annually, but I feel like at least in the short term, and like in the earlier part of this experience, I think it'll be helpful to maybe meet more often. And I don't know if the whole group, it's hard to have a conversation with so many people at the table, because you want to make sure that everybody's voice is heard, but we also want to be productive. So I don't know if it looks like maybe 2 reps from council or 2 reps from NCIP. I think let's play with that idea a little bit. I'd love to meet again sometime before the end of the year and just have a follow-up to this conversation, so we don't lose steam in the energy that we're moving in. I don't know if it should be something that's facilitated, where maybe we have, like whiteboard paper, right? And we do sticky, some kind of more interactive where we can work with each other, or just some even more intimated, facilitated conversation. I don't know what that looks like, but I think let's have a follow-up conversation, and I think we should commit to do something by the end of the year. I think that is, that's it. So thank you all. I had the pleasure of ending, and I know that everybody's like energy level is like going down here. So I appreciate everybody for taking the time. Again, this is, I think, this may be a first for a joint meeting between the council and the NCIP. So I see this, the fact that we're even just here today, I think says a lot about our need and ability to continue moving forward with each other. So truly, deeply appreciate all of you all. This is volunteer service, so we get it. We're in the same boat, except we do get a stipend. But it's not a living wage, I'll tell you that now. But I appreciate you all, appreciate everybody in the public, and thank you to staff for taking the time to work with us here. Have a good night, everybody.